mama on the shores of the Black Sea. Welcome to this evening's live stream with me, Connor Klein. And as you see, the title for today's live stream, The Days of the Stupid Tourist, are over. It's inspired by a viewer and longtime supporter of this channel, Ben, and he gave me the idea of today's live stream title and the subject. So I'm going to give you an update as to the situation here in Ukraine, the broader region, which I dub New Europe. So that includes countries like here, Latvia, that are emblazoned on my polo shirt here. Just going to make sure I can see your comments and questions at the same time. You can start by dropping those into the box down below. And we're going to have a light conversation framed by the famous book, The Class of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. It's something I actually read myself when I was at grad school studying international relations. It was a book that came out, I think, in 1996, although I was studying a bit later than that. Not too many years later, but later than that. And it was a reply to a famous book that was published by Francis Fukuyama, The End of History, which came out, I think, probably in circa 1991, just after the end of the Cold War. And that book, when we look at what has happened since then, they were trying to frame a paradigm about how international relations and political and economic systems would work. And parts of both have resonated with what has happened afterwards to a certain extent, not entirely. And The Class of Civilizations, I think, is particularly pertinent to here because in the book there are fault lines between civilizations, and they actually put it around here as one of the fault lines. And we do have the Russo-Ukrainian War. The reality is, if we look at what's happening in the Middle East, we have a war there for the last couple of weeks, and previously safe countries that were promoted, especially for relocation, tax benefits, escape the West, now look like particularly unpleasant places to hang out in compared to before. The difference between being in Dubai and being in Odesa, if you leave aside the weather in March, although it's been amazing weather actually here for the last week, we've had lots of sunshine. In terms of safety, well, the gap has definitely narrowed you in this new era that we have. And with the US President Donald Trump, and suddenly there are more wars again, and in general, the weakening of the post-World War II global order, so the rules-based order, as that becomes weaker and weaker, we're likely to see a lot more geopolitical instability. And now it's hitting the Middle East, so it's good to have a conversation about how you need to be informed with respect to geopolitics. Maybe not as much if you're a tourist, because obviously you're only going somewhere for a short time, but if you're planning to spend a significant amount of time in any region, you will need to understand the geopolitics more and more as we go on. There was also speculation or threats made by Donald Trump to many other countries, not just Iran and Venezuela, also Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, obviously Greenland. We had a standoff only just a couple of months ago. So there are many places that, for example, Colombia is heavily promoted as a place to move to or spend a lot of time in, especially to my audience as well, which is usually men between, we'll say, over 30 and, well, men normally single. Colombia isn't one of the other places here previously that would have been a very similar demographic, and I have many friends go between the two. But if it turns out that Donald Trump wants to launch a special military operation, inverted commas, against Colombia next, then it mightn't be the spot to be in. So you need to be more cognizant going forward about the different type of region that you may be spending a lot of time in, and it is better to have that deeper knowledge and understanding in addition to being able to integrate yourself better and know how to leave places if it needs be. So if you're new to this channel, my name is Connor Klein, and I promote a region that I spend nearly all my time in these days, that is New Europe. So we're talking about the region between Germany and Russia. I focus on a handful of countries. here in Ukraine. I had the biggest channel about relocation to Ukraine during the COVID pandemic from 2020 to 2022. Previous to that, I was focusing on Belarus and Ukraine, especially going there, partying a lot, meeting the beautiful women of the region, and then that involved into relocation. Obviously, we have the war, Russo-Ukrainian War, and the invasion in 2022. So I have my clients mainly with the alternatives in the region. So including here, my recommendation for the single guys, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Moldova, Kazakhstan, and we could say Romania. I did make one video in Romania as well since 2022. So I have a background in international relations. I actually studied at the primary school for IOR, and I had a specialization in strategic studies. So actually, Fukuyama is not in strategic studies. He was actually a professor at my university. I didn't take these classes. I did go in and listen to them. You can always go into the lecture. I didn't formally take it. And that was the kind of pedigree of international relations lectures that we had. Not that I agreed with Fukuyama about a lot of things at the time. We probably agree a bit more in the context of the Russo-Ukrainian War than I did about the Iraq War. I was studying there just after the Iraq War had taken place, so just was not the time in the US where I agreed with many people, since there was so much support for this war. That turned out to be, obviously in hindsight, not the sharpest decision that George Bush Jr. made. And I think with respect to this Operation Epic Fury, is not looking good for Donald Trump in general at this juncture. So the way that I do these live streams is that we have, I give a presentation at the beginning. You can drop your comments and questions down as I go along, and then we have a Q&A session. Also talk a bit about what's happening here in Ukraine, give you an update, also with respect to certain developments in the region, and also, since I also help my clients often with relationships, any different developments that we have or observations I have about things like dating dynamics or social circles in terms of business. Obviously, the very obvious big business development that I have been talking about on this channel since the summer is the utility of Ukrainian drone technology, because basically the US and US's allies in the Middle East are now tapping into the know-how that the Ukrainians have built up in the last 4 years since the Russian 2022 invasion. I guess drone warfare really started to come into its own probably since 2024. It started to dominate the battlefield here, and now we see that Ukraine is able to export its know-how and its technology. I will say, just as an opening statement, that since Operation Epic Fury here in Odesa, there has been a noticeable drop in the number of drone attacks. It's probably a quarter, maybe even less of what it was just 3 weeks ago. There was a big drone attack, mainly targeting other cities, including Kyiv. A couple of days ago, the Ukrainians said they shot down a remarkably high number of the drones, that their interceptor systems are getting better and better. But definitely it seems a bit there's definitely it's coincidence that Operation Epic Fury starts and the Iranians are firing all these drones at US military bases or just the allies of the US in the region, and there's a huge drop-off in drone attacks in Ukraine. It could also be in part the weather, because targeting the energy infrastructure now that we have sunshine and not as cold temperatures also is part of what is going on. But also the geopolitical interests of Russia are served by pushing up the oil price, because then they get a lot more money as a result to fund their war. So this is probably also a factor. It actually makes a lot of sense for them to send their drones to target, just give them to the Iranians to target the US and its allies, push up the price of oil, and then they can get a big windfall from that in order to continue their war again here in Ukraine and basically against the rest of Europe in reality in certain forms. So that is my opening explanation. If you're planning to come to this region, whether it's Ukraine or Moldova, I have 2 guides for those down below. You can go and check them out. I have a resource page if you're new to this region where you can go and check out and get some playlists that I put together that will explain this region in better, in a better, deeper format for you. They're also down below. There's a link to that, to the resource page on my website. Actually, I forgot to put the light here. I wonder if that makes much of a difference. I normally have yeah, that'll be more illuminated, I see there on the screen. So continue to drop your questions. Yes, I see a question here from Josh. I'll come to that after I give a little bit of a presentation. So I did turn off the air alerts on my phone. So yeah, I think actually what happened when it cut off the audio that time was that there has been an update to the air alerts app in Ukraine, and yeah, it just cuts out all the audio, because also now when I'm listening to YouTube, it suddenly cuts in when there's an air alert more than before. So I think they just made it harder for you to ignore the air alerts, and unfortunately that interrupted a few of that one live stream where it happened a few times. So I think to go with the title for today's live stream, ignoring the geopolitics is going to have more and more of a cost for you if you're traveling just globally in general, compared to say 10 years ago when there wasn't as much conflict or as uncertainty going on. Obviously we've had wars in different parts of the world, and maybe you have a different perception if you're living somewhere where unfortunately that was going on. But I think now that we've seen places that have been promoted for relocation and being safe and kind of part of the Leave the West brigade, and we see that not just Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but also it's affecting Oman, Saudi Arabia, which have been kind of up and coming for the last couple of years as a place to go and spend time, whether it's as a tourist or for relocation. But suddenly we see that's been targeted in other countries in the region, and it could very easily spread. The Iranian government clearly has a strategy in place that will push up the cost for the current war on the US, Israel, and its allies in the region. And if you were taking a trip to Dubai and not paying attention, then you can, as you can see, easily get caught up as a tourist. But I think really, tourists can just be unlucky. You weren't planning to go to the place for a long time. And I also had a friend who got stuck once when there was fighting between Israel and Lebanon, and then found themselves on the beach watching rockets fly by. It's more of, in terms of being just serendipity if you decide to move to a region. Especially, I had a bit of a, I guess, Schadenfreude moment, in the sense that someone who told me that, yeah, I'll come to Ukraine after the war, but I'm not going to go there until then. And then they're in Dubai, filming clips on their iPhone saying, look, it's all kind of, they didn't use the word fake news, but this is kind of what they meant. It's not that dangerous. Thanks to the government for shooting down all the drones. It seems to be a theme with a lot of Dubai influencers trying to downplay what's been going on in terms of personal safety or the danger of being in Dubai. And I actually agree that it's not statistically that dangerous to be in Dubai. The real problem is if you needed to leave. A guy I know, his lawyer got stuck in Dubai for a few days, and the government, had to have a repatriation plane to get them back. So there are a lot of inconveniences like that. But the same people who think coming to Ukraine at the moment, statistically, as I said in many live streams, the risk factor is about 1 in a million per day if you're in a city like Odesa of being injured or killed by a Russian rocket or drone. Well, I guess they're almost the same thing at this point, but some sort of Russian munition, where I was talking far from the front line. In Dubai, I assume it's not as high as 1 in a million, it must be less than that. But you see the gap is closing for certain people. They don't seem to appreciate that. Statistically, the risk here is also very low. The big impact is going to be in terms of property prices. If you had invested in Dubai, then as one of my clients have, we discussed it, he thinks it will rebound, but if the region is seen as unstable, then of course many people are going to be less attracted to keep pouring their money into the United Arab Emirates or other countries in the region, and many people may actually decide to leave and to go somewhere else now that they realize that they are living in a politically unstable region, and there was evidence that this would happen, not just Donald Trump's statements, but there was already a drone attack on, it was Abu Dhabi airport back in 2022. So there was always a potential for these things to spill over. Now we've seen it finally happen. So in terms of the Clash of Civilizations, it's a book that was one of the two, I guess, big IOR books that caught the public imagination, not just practitioners, back in the 1990s. There was this debate after the end of the Cold War, which obviously affected this region quite a lot because Ukraine became independent, the Soviet Union dissolved, and you had the end of history from Francis Fukuyama that basically said that liberal democracy and capitalism had won the intellectual debate about which is the best system, and this would be the system that people would follow going forward. There's obviously communism had ended in this region, and we had the Cold War before. It was this clash between communism and capitalism throughout the world. And Samuel Huntington, he said, no, there will be further clashes, and we will be based basically on these civilization divides. Let me have a look and see the map. I did save a map. I mean, I don't know if this will come out on the screen, but that is kind of the map, more or less. You can see the different colors, but basically had a Western world, Western Christendom, he called it. And what affects here is the Orthodox Christian civilization. He saw that as different, obviously, in the Islamic world. And, you know, we have the clash, you could say, in the Middle East, because you have Israel that he put in the Western camp. I'm pretty sure I presume he did. Let me see, let me zoom in. Yes, it is in the Western color. And there is mapped, it's not really where the fault line turned out to be, but it's reasonably close. We obviously have this clash between the civilization that is under the control of Moscow, that is a Russian sphere of influence, so not just Russia, it's also Belarus. Here in Ukraine we have the war, and he saw the line as being kind of, you know, Poland to Ukraine. I guess it was kind of Ukraine, it's, as history turned out, it's Ukraine and Belarus are really the fault line in which the war is being fought between the two civilizations. I have some videos from just before the war, not just that I made after the invasion, outlining what are the root causes. I'll link it on a card and put it down afterwards when I watch this on replay. But basically the war here is about which bloc or civilization, to use Huntington's term, Ukraine wants to be part of. It has obviously a certain amount of history with Moscow and this process of colonization was in the Russian Empire and then in the Soviet Union. And on the other hand, you have the European Union as an alternative, or the Western world. And if you look at Poland, for example, and the amazing economic growth and just overall quality of life and how that transformed since they left Moscow's sphere of influence since the early 1990s, that was something that was very attractive to the everyday Ukrainian. Overall, people didn't really think that, okay, we're going to be like Germans or like Germany, but we can be like Poland and Poles, since in the 90s, Ukraine started actually off from a higher level than Poland. Now you look at Poland, it's like basically double the GDP per capita of, now we have, I can hear something in the distance, so even though I turned off my air alerts, I guess there is maybe a drone attack right now, ironically. Is that a drone attack or is it a rocket attack? Let me just see. Ah, yes. So I will have maybe some fireworks. I'll be able to see them pretty soon. So you see that Poland, it's now got a GDP per capita at PPS of double of Russia, for example, more than double of Russia, probably, if you look at the state of the Russian economy. And this is something that would, since Moscow wasn't willing to let Ukraine voluntarily let Ukraine just join the West and seek that greater economic prosperity, we now have this war where Russia tries to use violence. War is the continuation of politics by other means. That's a famous quote from Clausewitz, and that is what we have as the root cause, just to simplify things in a nutshell. So this paradigm of different civilizations is kind of useful in terms of analyzing some of the developments that we've seen in the last few years. he saw these civilizations as being defined by religion, culture, historical experience, and their institutions. And to a certain extent, that's true. He thought there'd be more Orthodox civilizations. That would also include places like Greece, Serbia, Romania, as well as Ukraine. They would actually be in the same civilization as Moscow. Hasn't quite turned out that way. The Orthodox part of it isn't as big a unifying bond as he had predicted, but you can definitely see that where he put the fault line is a place where we see a major war, the biggest war in Europe since World War II, and we see one obviously in the Middle East, although I think that was pretty predictable, but you see that we have Israel as being part of the West, and then you have a different civilization. We can see, again, it doesn't really help us when we're looking at the way that Iran has responded. They're attacking not just Israel, but they're attacking a lot of other countries in the region. So it's a little bit more about alliances, since Iran is also allied with Russia and with China. But it's still an interesting schema to look at how things have developed since the 1990s. And you had all these different civilizations and different fault lines. And it's a book that at least you should read a synopsis of, as it definitely has been useful in analyzing how things have developed. First here in 2014, when we had the beginning of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which then was kind of in this limited in scope. It was just in Donbass in the east and in Crimea, and how it has developed. And this obviously then affects other countries in the region. We have Latvia, which is here emblazoned on my Polish shirt. If you look at the Baltic states, they are also on this line that he pointed out, being on the western side. They joined NATO, they joined the European Union. Again, we have a civilizational difference, and I think that is something that comes up and is useful to understand in terms of culture. When you are in, say, the Baltics, there you have some people still have a lot in common with, say, Moscow, but it's declining and getting smaller and smaller, and they are more and more, we'll say, as part of the European culture or the Western culture, and that is something that's significant to understand. I think we have a widening for sure in terms, I see it here in Ukraine, between, even here in Odesa, which has been traditionally more Russian speaking, although today it's kind of more bilingual between Ukrainian and Russian. A lot of influences from Moscow, that there definitely is a change, especially in the younger people, where they are more European in orientation. This war has accelerated that compared to Russia, that is, Russian Federation, that is looking inward more and more and becoming quite distinct. So it's also important to understand from the cultural point of view if you were to visit the region. So this is what we see in terms of fault lines. And that was defined by Hunting a lot to do with the history, because we'll say Poland and the Baltic states were in different empires at different times, sometimes under Russian influence, sometimes under influence. You had the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, you had the Austrian Empire, and these influenced the different regions. So Western Ukraine was in part of Poland for a while, like if you look at Lviv or Lvov in Polish, and then also in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, that definitely formed, you can see the culture and its denizens in a different way to further east, which there's a lot of different influences in terms of the pull of either Moscow or Vienna, or of, I guess, Krakow at one stage, and Warsaw, and then these parts of the country developed. So eastern and southern part was closer to Moscow in orientation, if we look at it historically, even since 1991, than parts like Lviv in the west. So that is just a little bit of background. It's not going to be a very heavy geopolitical presentation, because this is more a lifestyle channel. I do have the other channel that I may go back and start making a lot more hardcore geopolitics content for in the coming weeks. I've been focusing a lot more on, first of all, my Ukrainian program that finally I've sent around the first files for. If that's also on my resource page, you can still join it if you're interested in learning Ukrainian. We'll start the first live streams as part of that program in the coming weeks. And I think the key point that I want to express with today's presentation is that you need to be more of a savvy traveler or relocation person going forward, that ignoring geopolitics completely is possibly going to lead to you making miscalculations about where you're going to spend your time. Again, you can go to a lot of countries in the world just as a visitor for a short period of time, and of course you can look up what's going on locally and make an assessment about that. But obviously if you're just going for a week, you have a lot less risk than if you're going to move somewhere, maybe buy property, invest in a business, and set up your lifestyle. So if you're spending a lot of time somewhere, and you need to be more aware of the geopolitical risk going forward, and that can, as I said at the outset, affect a lot of places that are promoted very heavily, like in Latin America. Africa is basically a tinderbox, so that is also trending a bit with Kenya and other parts of Africa. But it's important to understand that if we're going to live in this world where the rules-based order were to, say, collapse completely, then you would see a huge number of regional conflicts and wars. So Africa is just primed for that, because most of the borders are old colonial borders. There are different peoples who have a lot in common living across those borders who might want to change them. And if the new principle is that the inviolability of national borders is no longer going to be, maybe not guaranteed, because obviously rules-based order didn't work 100% all of the time, especially if a major country that has a veto on the UN Security Council, that's China, Russia, US, Britain, and France were involved. It still meant that changing borders was very hard through violence, so the incentive for war was a lot less. But Russia's obviously tried to change that, and Vladimir Putin and the Muscovites here in Ukraine since 2014, and now claiming that they can annex lots of different territory. But we've also seen it for Donald Trump, where he was threatening to invade and change the borders in Denmark, in effect, or part of Denmark with Greenland. So if that's going to be the new norm, then you really need to understand what's going on geopolitically to assess the risk. Also, if you are thinking of getting residencies and citizenships, it's also important to understand that, especially if you're a man of military age, that if you become a citizen because you think, oh, I want to give up my US passport, it's normally US citizens, because of having to pay taxes as a non-resident, and there's a lot of other inconveniences that come with being an American abroad at times. So some people just renounce US citizenship, know some of them personally, and they take on another citizenship. It's important to understand that what is the risk, assuming you don't actually want to fight in a conflict, of taking a citizenship in terms of conscription. Countries like Serbia, which is promoted to a certain extent, the most promoted place to go and try and get a passport, but a lot of Russians move there, for example, with this Russo-Ukrainian War dissidents, and then they try to become citizens through naturalization. It's kind of like a program that some of these sovereign man channels, the ones that promote different residencies, have promoted in the past. They introduce compulsory military service for men. I think it's up until 27 years of age, so probably not going to affect too many viewers this evening, but that of course can be extended, and they have been laying the information space in Serbia for a possible war, accusing Croatia and Albania of organizing to attack Serbia. And they've been apparently getting some sort of munitions from China as well. So this looks a little bit ominous when there isn't, from what I can see, a real risk that Albania and Croatia are plotting to invade Serbia. That seems to come out of left field. So they may be preparing something. So if you became a Serbian citizen, thinking that either you wanted a second passport or you wanted to renounce your American citizenship, and you happen to be in Belgrade and they start a war, well, you have to think of what are the possible consequences. Here in Ukraine, which is a bit of a different scenario, right? They got invaded by the Russian Federation, and in 2014 there was some martial law introduced, but it was not to the same extent as in 2022. But if you are a Ukrainian man, on day 2, so on February 25th, 2022, you can no longer leave Ukraine without permission. Doesn't mean that you're going to get conscripted automatically. Still today doesn't mean that you're conscripted. It's actually over 25 years of age that you're eligible for conscription in Ukraine. However, you weren't able to leave, so you got to think about, if I'm not a Serbian citizen and I go to the border, I can leave. It was actually a bit problematic leaving Ukraine as a foreigner as well, day 2 because I faced that. I did manage to get out, but it took a few hours longer than expected. But if I had been a Ukrainian citizen, okay, I do have my foreign passport, but for example, I've been in Ukraine as a Ukrainian citizen, hypothetically speaking, then legally I wouldn't have been able to leave. So you got to think about these things. Is that something that you really want to have to endure or risk just to have another passport? Also, another place is Turkey, because you can get citizenship by investment in real estate, so it's become increasingly popular. And Turkey as well, major regional geopolitical actor, and has long-standing conflict with ethnic Kurds in the country. Ethnic Kurds live on other sides of their borders with Syria, with Iraq, also in Iran there are a lot of Kurds. So there is a potential that they will get dragged into a regional conflict. If we're looking at the situation in the Middle East at the moment, that doesn't mean they're going to conscript every man in Turkey. However, you won't want to think about, what is the risk level if I become a Turkish citizen and there is a war. Will they then call up a certain number of men? They'll probably be reservists first who have served in the military, but would they impose other restrictions as a man of military age who is a Turkish citizen? It mightn't be as plain sailing as you think. So these are the things that you've got to think about. Also, if you are in a country like here in Ukraine in 2022, how are you going to leave? How are you going to be able to operate and set up your life afterwards? Personally experienced this. Obviously, my business between 2020 and 2022 was focused on basically relocation to a large extent to Ukraine. Obviously, that wasn't very popular after the invasion in 2022, and I had to also leave and exit. I was paying attention to what was happening geopolitically, but I was in the minority, even amongst Ukrainians here. Most people refuse to believe that a major war is about to take place, and nearly all the other online influencers, YouTubers were here were saying, no, it's not going to happen. It's all Western history. They bought into the Russian psyop, which was obviously to have a surprise element to make their invasion more likely to succeed. I, on the other hand, was already on the border, in a position where I could leave reasonably easily. I wasn't going to get trapped in the capital Kyiv or here in Odesa, for example. So that intel that the US had, they did share it, but most people didn't pay attention to it. So you need to be a lot more savvy in terms of understanding the risk. With war and conflict also comes a lot of opportunities. So price of property in certain parts of Ukraine is very attractive at the moment. It's obviously factoring in the geopolitical risk. And here, as I've been saying since the summer, investing in agriculture, in the defense industry, and real estate are 3 different sectors where there's a lot of possibility, and we see the proof of that with Zelensky holding the cards, to quote Donald Trump. In terms of drone interceptors, now the US and its allies really need their help, and that is the industry where there's been a lot of synergies and cooperation between Ukrainian defense industry companies and foreigners. I know there was a lot last summer here in Odesa with a lot of effectively arms dealers showing up in Ukraine, particularly interested in the drone sector. So these are things that are good to understand, not just for your own personal safety, but also for you to be able to take advantage of different business opportunities that may arise, whether it's buying real estate or, in this case, the defense industry. If you've been investing in Ukrainian drone manufacturers, even if it's just investing on, I guess, if it's a publicly traded company or buying stock in that kind of industry or making an investment in it, then you'd probably be sitting pretty right now. That is, not the way that I would want the opportunities to be in Ukraine necessarily. Would much prefer that there's no invasion or war, but this is the new geopolitical reality that we live in. So you need to be a lot more streetwise, a lot more aware, and definitely be a lot more skeptical of people who are trying to sell you a country or a place to move to or to buy, get a residency or even especially a passport. Residency isn't, I think, too problematic. It's just in the sense that, well, you're not going to get conscripted if you're a resident in general, although you do need to also be careful of that. I'll have to walk that back a little bit when I think about it, because in Russia, if you're a permanent resident of Russia, you can be called up for the military. And this actually also happened in the US, back with the Vietnam War, where they had conscription. They also called up green card holders, so people who weren't American citizens but were green card holders, so permanent residents of the United States. They also were eligible for conscription at the time. So yeah, maybe also need to be maybe potentially concerned about getting a residency. If it's a permanent residency, that seems to be what we're operating under with respect to the Russian Federation. I don't advise you go to the Russian Federation under any circumstance to become even a tourist, never mind a resident. I don't think as a tourist you will get conscripted or have too many difficulties in terms of the authorities wanting to do something to you. Here in Ukraine, I am stopped and asked for my document to prove that I am registered with the military services as a non-citizen. Well, it doesn't make a difference if you're resident or non-resident in Ukraine. I don't have to have that, so I just show them my passport and it's all good and never had any problems. But just be aware of the rules of where you're going and make more strategic, shrewd decisions about where you're going to invest. There are, of course, as I said, opportunities because of this new political reality where things are not as stable, but there are a lot of downsides and things you need to think about. And a lot of people are trying to sell you something. They're not factoring the geopolitical risk here. I do discuss the geopolitical risk. It's impossible to ignore in this region. If you're in Poland or the three Baltic states, then you have to factor it in. The price of property, for example, in Latvia is super attractive for the European Union, high rental yields. But there are two major factors, which are the geopolitical risk of a Russian invasion. At the moment, in the near term, very low because Russia is just basically bogged down in Ukraine and it doesn't look like Vladimir Putin wants to stop it to attack the Baltic states without achieving a strategic milestone here, at the very least taking the Donbass region, being able to declare something as a victory, then it may become a bigger issue. And the second thing is actually got declining birth rates and immigration out of Latvia over the last 2 decades, and it's not clear if they're going to be able to reverse that and have a higher demand for real estate like we see in Ireland, for example, which, you know, the price is so crazy in Ireland, not just because of the economic development of the country, but also they didn't build or allow that much building of properties in Ireland since the 2008 economic crisis, and also the population of Ireland is burgeoning because we have such a successful economy and a lot of people moving there, so it's putting up the pressure on the housing. So there are a lot of different factors to take into account. We may see a similar phenomenon in Latvia in the future as living standards rise and they have more immigration in the country. I think that's almost inevitable. So it may turn out that that's less of a concern, but the geopolitics certainly are. Should I go to your questions and comments? I see quite a few coming in. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to just mention now as kind of final takeaways from just the presentation. So I think overall, if you look at, and I encourage you to go and at least read a synopsis of the Clash of Civilizations. It was something that was debated a lot, you know, when I was studying IO, which is over 20 years ago now, both in Bologna in Italy and also in Washington, D.C. I went to Johns Hopkins University. So their School of International Relations, which is known as SICE, School of International Studies is what the acronym means. And civilization still matters to a certain extent. I think that's going to impact a lot more nowadays, looking at it in terms of the cultural nuances of where you move to. It's another thing also, if you're going to move somewhere, I know there's this whole kind of expat promotion. Normally people are trying to sell you residencies or move somewhere where they don't want to integrate. They're not going to learn the local language. They're going to hang around with other foreigners. They're going to hang out in a certain part of the city, and you're obviously free to do that. But if you're going to understand where you're moving to and really get the full value out of it and understand the risks and actually probably over the long term enjoy living in the place, because if you're just hanging out with other foreigners, it's kind of a holiday vibe and people are pretty transient, then it may not be the place for you to move to over the long term. I experienced that a little bit. It was a foreigner bubble. I used to work as a lawyer in Brussels. I worked in the private sector, and I also worked at the European Union institutions as a lawyer. So I was there for I think about 7 years in total, working in top law firms, working in competition laws like antitrust law, anti-monopoly law, and there's such a huge turnover in that. The churn is like immense between the law firms. People come from all over Europe, all over the world as well, to work. And there's the Brussels bubble. I hang out in Place du Luxembourg. If you go there, if you're in Brussels on a Friday evening, weather is nice, you just have all the Euro nerds, as we used to call, I guess, ourselves, because I was also one of them, working at the institutions or industries related institutions. people are coming and going all the time. The issue can be over the long term because it's so transient as a place, and you are not remotely integrated into Belgian society. It kind of becomes a subculture, but there it's pretty big. But if you are moving somewhere and you're not going to integrate at all, may not actually like it, especially if you have family that you move there later on, if you are not actually married and dating someone who's from the area, then it can be quite a, I guess, unsatisfactory situation over the medium term. And really you need to understand also the geopolitics to understand the civilization and the culture that you are moving to. I think with respect to that, the outline and the theory that Huntington had, especially for this region with the fault line, is quite important because you understand just culturally with the languages, with the religions, with people's mentality. One of my clients pointed out quite interestingly that all the marriage agencies that were here, none of them were ever based in Lviv from what we can tell, or Western Ukraine, where it's more Ukrainian speaking, where corruption is, from what I can see, a lot less. And yeah, just the mentality is quite different to say here in Odesa, which used to be scam central for all these things back in the day. In terms of this kind of industry, at least I would say after Ukraine made it visa free for Westerners to come here, for Europeans, North Americans to come here, Russia still had visas, so that was a bit different. All those kind of industries moved to Ukraine en masse. Before that, they were actually split between Russia and Ukraine in terms of scamming foreign men when they were interested in dating the local lovelies here of the region. And just understanding that is quite important to understand the kind of place you're going to, the mentality. There's also a guy I met, John, who's South African, and I think I must have met him in Kyiv many years ago, and he was in Lviv. Met him at a bar, so we went out, had a few drinks, went partying, actually a place that was open all night, so he brought me there. So it was good for my intel. But he's actually living in Lviv and going to move back to Kyiv because the mentality is quite different there in Western Ukraine, and he finds it quite hard. He'd also been studying Russian before, and Russian's of declining use in Ukraine in general and in the region. It's still useful in a few places, but in Western Ukraine, just people don't speak much Russian, and when he tries to speak Ukrainian, he always has this kind of, I guess, South African Russian accent to a certain extent. So he just feels that he culturally is going to be better fit in a place like Kyiv than he is in Lviv. And these places are evolving all the time, but we still have a lot of influence from the culture and the civilization behind it. And I guess the overall message is smart travelers or people who are relocating, they also study the geopolitics and not just the tax benefits or the cost of living, and how are you going to have an infinity pool in your apartment if you go to Thailand or wherever it is. And I think this applies not just to this region but now globally. A lot of places that promote it probably going to turn out to have a high level of risk going forward. It may also be in Southeast Asia. China may have ideas about taking Taiwan. I actually think that's now looking like a bigger and bigger risk. I'm not an expert in China, but I have something that I can't really talk about that leads me to believe that, or I can talk about on YouTube, that leads me to believe that the risk is a lot higher than people are talking about, because we're distracted by what's happening here in Ukraine and now what's happening in the Middle East. China has been taking more steps to get ready for taking some action against Taiwan. You may see this happen all over Southeast Asia. So just be aware that, as I said, there is a certain amount of the passport bro community, because it's a lot of them are Black Americans. They go to Africa. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity in Africa, but if there's no respect of national borders, and that's the first place that's going to have a lot of problems, because the way the borders have been drawn historically. And even Latin America, that was a part of the world, a continent that South America had a lot of wars. If we go back about 150 years ago, you had the different imperial powers, obviously before that, fighting over different territory, also with the people who were there before the Europeans arrived. I guess we can call them indigenous peoples that were there. And even the countries that we know now, like Bolivia, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Argentina. I'm just trying to think of all the countries that were all fighting actually over their own borders in Latin America. It's not like it's unified, super country or an empire there. They all split up. So there is potential for other border clash. Also, even in the 60s, there were some regional conflicts in Central America. So these places that look very safe now in the new geopolitical reality may quite quickly become problematic. So you're going to have to, if you're being savvy and being wise, factor all that in as we go forward. So that I'll end the presentation, just a little bit of synopsis of the Clash of Civilizations and some of the points that you can take out of it in terms of understanding the new geopolitical reality that we live in. It's not 100% applicable. He wasn't the oracle, as it turned out, Mr. Huntington, but there are definitely things that you can learn from the book. And also, the main thing that I want to emphasize is, of course, that geopolitics is back and it is going to be of increasing importance, even if you're just traveling as a tourist, but even more important if you're planning to relocate, get a residency somewhere, maybe become a citizen somewhere else, set up your lifestyle, and things can turn very quickly, and you need to understand the alliance. Another country that's promoted a bit, but it's just in these circles, and I'm just fed on YouTube because I watched one guy, his crew had actually even, his staff had reached out to me to do an interview with him, but then I didn't hear back from him. It was a few months ago, and he was in Dubai, and then he was leaving, and he was going to Georgia. Georgia, it's also on one of these fault lines. It's got a pro-Russian, pro-Moscow government, but a population that's anti-Moscow, and if you look at the majorities of the country, and it's not, you know, the part of the country is occupied by Russia. Sound familiar to what is the situation here in Ukraine pre-2022? And he's kind of saying, yes, this is the plan B. Well, maybe you should be thinking of going back to the US or to the UK. Somewhere else in Western Europe looks a lot safer than going to Georgia at the moment. I'm not saying that Georgia is about to be engulfed by a huge conflict, but it does carry a certain amount of risk. Also, if you're not a Georgian citizen, then at the moment it's pretty easy to do banking and you don't need a visa, but that can change if these alliances end up in more conflict. It's hard to predict the consequences. So far, Donald Trump seems to be giving Vladimir Putin a complete pass to do anything he wants to the US. As I said, I see there are a lot less drones being fired at Ukraine since this operation at Epic Fury took place. And guess where there are a lot of similar drones being used, fired at Americans and at American allies? It's in the Middle East. Russia has a huge incentive. So you can put it two and two together and say it's probable that Russia is not just helping with maybe targeting, but they could also be supplying the Iranians, sending a lot of the drones back. It would make sense if you're looking at them by creating this issue and dragging it out. Russia can make a lot of money. Their economy is in huge problems. They have a recession. The price of oil is very low. They have to sell at a discount. They spend 40% of their budget officially on the military and internal security, which is basically oppressing the population, keeping them in check. And we're running through their gold reserves to a certain extent. They've preparing the information space in Russia and the institutional structure to make a very unpopular decision. It looks like for the last few months they've been making it harder to use social media accounts that would be useful if there's an unpopular decision you wanted to protest against it, or you wanted to organize a coup d'etat. Then you would probably be using these kind of apps like Telegram. YouTube is also very badly throttled, and now the internet has been down for most of the week, it seems, in Moscow. So again, looks like more testing for being able to limit the ability of people to communicate. Again, all pointing towards that Vladimir Putin is about to make a very unpopular decision, probably going to be another general mobilization in Russia. But now he's got the windfall of money. Maybe he can just pay people with the money that he's now got as a windfall in the last 2 weeks to sign up for the Russian military and come here to try and destroy Ukraine and steal their property and kill the people here. As grim as that sounds, it is the reality. So we don't know what is going to be the outcome of this special military operation by Donald Trump in the Middle East. But we see that Vladimir Putin also launched his special military operation, and it had huge consequences for living in Russia. Again, if you're a permanent resident, you've been called up for the military now. As a foreigner, the war is going on, the economy is in free fall. Imagine you bought an apartment in Moscow in 2020. Is that going to be worth very much in the future? What is your quality of life going to be there? And yeah, if you became a permanent resident or citizen, you may even end up being drafted into the military potentially, and maybe even in the next few months. And on the flip side, we see that Donald Trump doesn't seem to have a coherent strategy. Even Piers Morgan seems to have abandoned him, one of his last stalwart fans who's maybe not part of the MAGA movement but aligned with it. I even saw him criticize Trump today. It doesn't seem like there's a strategy for what's going on. It was more hope, and he has a bunch of real estate investors advising him on what's going on and leading negotiations. So we can see the more instability that's going to cause. And again, the relationship with Russia doesn't seem to be calling Russia out. They lifted some of the sanctions on Russia because of the spike in the oil price. And yeah, what happens if that becomes solidified, that we have an alliance? Iran, Russia, Georgia would be on that side of the fence. You're living in Georgia, just to pull it back to the idea of relocating to Georgia. And will it be as easy to do your banking there? Will it be, if you went and became a citizen, are you going to get engulfed in the conflict in some way? There's potential, not very high at the moment, but it's always a possibility that could happen. And is he going, this one particular creator, is he now going to have to relocate out of Georgia and go to his plan C, when if he'd stayed in rainy, I don't know, London or Dublin, he'd be completely fine. He would have had to pay more taxes, but he wouldn't have had the risk of having to flee a few geopolitical situations. Anyways, on that point, before I get to some of the other developments, I'll go and look at your questions and just pull it up here. Let me know if you like this format. I've turned it into a bit of a show on the Sunday. My original intention with doing live streams from Ukraine was just to show what was going on in the street during the daytime, but because of the time difference and the sun going down early, I decided to do this for the last few weeks, make it kind of regular and throw in the geopolitics. And if you're enjoying this, let me know, and I may continue to do it in the future. We'll see as we go forward, especially when I have clients coming from my in-person services again. Then yeah, I probably won't be available on the Sundays. That's kind of the clash with doing both. And if you're looking for an inside strategy, which is what I help my clients with, then you can go and book a strategy call down below with my consulting. You'll find a link to that down below in the description. Obviously, I help clients also in person. You need to apply for that. And there's also a link down below for implementing all these things in person with me, coming to the region, coming to the city in the region. And you don't have to be billing nomads or relying on some charlatan online who's told you that moving to X country, whatever it happens to be, is the bee's knees, and then they're just selling you a bridge over there in Brooklyn. So let me go to the Q&A section, see what comments we have. Joshua says, Buongiorno, Connor. Did the UK match Southern Europe in economic stagnation this year? That boosts New Europe? Maybe. The UK. Well, the UK, if we look at, since they had the Brexit vote, so Brexit Britain, I looked at the GDP per capita, PPS, so that's taking price into consideration of price level. And if you look at the average, UK was above the average in the European Union when it was still a member, and it's dropped 10 percentage points since the Brexit vote, which was 10 years ago. So they're losing 1% percentage point per year relative to other countries, and that is a signal about how their economy is going. There was a guy who I had a discussion in the comments, and then he wanted to do a video with me, and then I know he hasn't responded, but anyways, he has this doom and gloom about everywhere, and that the UK will, about Poland. That's why we had the discussion about the Polish economy, that it's not going to continue to grow, and UK will rebound because it can't get any worse. It can get a lot worse. And until they rejoin the European Union, which is their biggest economy, which is the biggest economy in the region, obviously, and one of the three big global economies, US, China, and the European Union, I don't see how they're going to reverse the trend. It's probably going to get worse. Before it gets a lot better, in the UK can even disintegrate, because there will probably be a referendum in Northern Ireland within the next decade, and Northern Ireland voted to stay in the European Union, not to leave it. And obviously with the drop in the economic standards, very possible that Northern Ireland would then vote to join the Republic, so it would just become part of the South, already be back in the European Union. And at that stage, who knows if Scotland would want to stay in as part of Great Britain. They could also decide that they want out, and then you'll see it very quickly disintegrate. So your original question about the economic stagnation, the UK is basically stagnated for a decade, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not very impressed by the Starmer government either. So, and then what's the alternative? reform. The guys who created the whole Brexit debacle in the first place, no, they're not an alternative. The Tories will probably get back in at the next elections. That's my prediction, because you've seen a lot more political competition. There's also parties further to the right of reform, and they will probably take some of their vote. Plus, we have then also quite populist on the far left. You have the Greens, or more, will take some of the vote also from reform as well as not just from Labour. And then we'll have the Tories maybe come back under new leadership. So a lot of things can happen. I don't think the UK will improve in the next 5 years dramatically. Oh, someone says, could I speak louder? Sorry about that. Something wrong with the sound. I don't know if that was a problem for everybody. I'm only reading it now. Let me know if that's still a problem. I can, can I hear it here? It seems fine. Okay. Recently moved to Switzerland, Chris says, for work. I feel pretty lucky with the current situation, what's going on. There you go. Suddenly the West is looking like the best again compared to some other regions. Obviously, we're part of the West here in Ukraine, at least this part of Ukraine that's not under occupation. And in New Europe, there's a higher geopolitical risk. But right now, if you're not in Ukraine, then if you go to neighboring Moldova, it's very similar to Ukraine. You don't have a war. You don't have to worry about drones or any of that stuff. Josh asks, do you think that the Bretton Woods Agreement ends this decade? Well, hard to know at this point. Also because the midterms are going to come up in the US. Is Donald Trump going to be a super lame duck president in the second part? I think so. I think also this Epstein file thing will go on, and there's no doubtly going to be some consequence to that at a certain point. I don't see how he can wiggle his way out of that one. It just seems like that's inevitable. It's going to take down more people. It's already taken down the British ambassador to the US, Mandelson, and obviously the former Prince Andrew. So we'll see what else. Joshua asks, do I teach men how to cold approach? You're going to have to be a little bit more clear about what you mean by that. Do you mean doing the digging malarkey and being pestering girls in the street? Then definitely not. But if it's about being calibrated and speaking to strangers in a social situation like an event, or maybe sitting in a cafe and someone sits down beside you and you want to strike up a conversation, then yeah, I can help you with that. I help guys with their communication skills in general and their ability to socialize, to build a social circle. Also, obviously, to meet the beautiful women of this region. So yeah, the best way, if you want to do that as a DIY, is do it yourself, is to send me an email, connorklein@connorklein.com. Actually, it would be better to be on my mailing list because I actually had a promotion for my old program that I used to have here on the channel. It's actually until, well, it's already over. So I guess you got to send me the email, connor@connorklein.com. I'll send you the offer for it. If you would like to get your bespoke strategy, then we can jump on a consulting call together, and that you can book down below. Of course, if you want to do these things in person, you can apply for the in-person immersion, but that is application only. I only even get on the phone with less than 10% of people who apply, so I guess it's like a 5% success rate. So if you want to shoot your shot, Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take, although he said that in the sense that, because he was exacerbated apparently. I watched the interview. He actually wasn't saying take every shot. He was getting annoyed because people were telling him to shoot all the time. But in any case, you can book a consulting call down below. It's probably the best way if you want that kind of advice. But if you want to have someone teach you and implement it with you, then that is something you can apply for on the in-person experience. The New York experience down below. All those great links. John says, good to see you. Good to see you, John. I know we had a conversation, so hopefully all is well with you. It's easy getting my temporary resident permit and registered address, which can be problematic if renting, as people are reluctant to register for it. Okay, so you didn't have a problem getting your temporary residence permit here in Ukraine. Okay, but it can be a problem if you're a foreigner, if they're reluctant to register you for rental properties. Okay, good to know. He used an immigration attorney. They had my documents translated, arranged insurance, and walked me through the office in Kyiv. Very good. I remember you were in Kremenchuk, which is the center of Ukraine. Joshua's in Ireland, is Ireland a European Singapore? Everyone puts their headquarters there. Yes. as part of the Celtic Tiger. I mean, Celtic was the name for the economic boom up until 2008, but I guess post 2008, yes, there are a lot of European headquarters, EU headquarters, a lot, Brexit Britain was also a bit of a boon for Ireland because English speaking in the European Union, not so far from London, and a lot of the business actually moved to Dublin as well. So yeah, a bit of a Singapore. You got Google are based there, lots of big US corporations. They put their headquarters in, at least for the European Union, in Ireland, in Dublin. So yeah, apparently you can get Irish citizenship. I suspect one of these big, I call them sovereign man channels, but maybe there's a better term with these relocation, give up your US passport and get a second passport, residency, kind of style of channels. I think a lot of them are, well, if they have sense, they probably try to become an Irish citizen, but yeah, you can set that up, but I think it takes about 5 years and you need to probably live in Ireland. So I'm always kind of intrigued. I suspect one of the major ones actually lives in Ireland and he just doesn't ever let that on. He's talking about all these other countries that you should move to, but I suspect that he's actually sitting in rainy, maybe not super high-tech Dublin, but reasonably high-tech Dublin all the time and just not saying anything. But, we'll see. Maybe I'll make a video about that, seeing what happens in the Middle East, seeing where there are other conflicts, because a lot of these places, I said, one guy was leaving Dubai and going to Georgia. I mean, if you want to avoid geopolitical risk, don't go to Georgia. You may have to leave there as well. You have a government. I actually have a regular viewer, who's on here. I won't say his name because, he probably doesn't want attention on himself since he's in Georgia. And he said, yeah, that you're getting attacked by the police as a foreigner. Whenever there are protests, it happens quite a bit and they're quite aggressive. So that's something that the relocate to Georgia crowd are not going to tell you because they're going to be scared to say it. Because if they say it and they have a big channel, then maybe the Georgian government will get angry with them and they may tell them they got to leave. So that's also problems. Big problem in the Middle East. I don't think it was Dubai, but I think, was it Oman or some other country that some Brits actually filmed the drone attacks and then they put it online and they got detained. Now, we have laws against that also in Ukraine. They don't seem to be as strict as they used to be at the beginning of the invasion. There were a lot of journalists who came who were suddenly doing live streams and, well, people can correct their fire, obviously, if they're able to watch your live stream and see what they hit or not. So doing that can be problematic. It seems to be less problematic nowadays. It was a big issue back in 2022. But recording in general, that's something to be aware of. You're not going to a country where you have actual civil rights a lot of the time. Now, in wartime, the government is going to take away many of your civil rights. We have that built into democratic systems, but you need to understand that even in peacetime, in, say, the United Arab Emirates, you don't have freedom of speech. Like, basically, Pavel Durov is there talking about how amazing the Emirates has his own platform, Telegram. You can't do video calls from the United Arab Emirates because they wanted a way to be able to eavesdrop. He didn't give it, so can't have it. But he doesn't talk about it. I didn't point that out because if he starts saying, oh, look, they do this and this to me, they probably tell him to leave because you don't have freedom of speech. So a lot of these people are, they're misleading people because obviously someone who doesn't look into it isn't going to understand that while he's talking up to your mind is he's actually can't say the truth. It's just that you don't have the same rights. It's actually not so rosy, but no one can say it because they'd be scared of getting deported. So that's why I was saying there's a bit of schadenfreude about this guy who had been saying you only come to Ukraine after the war, but then at the same time it's Dubai and there's drones flying around saying everything is fine. That is a trend from all these influencers in the Emirates. Now, are they doing it because they're paid? Are they doing it just because they believe it? But they're all copying each other and doing it. Or are they just scared if they don't do it? They say, hey, I'm leaving the Emirates because I'm not going to live with the rockets. And yeah, the government isn't telling the truth that it doesn't hit things. They just lie to you. Are they going to, they're probably too scared that they'll get in trouble. So that's something also to be very cognizant of. You're going to a country where you might pay less tax, but if something goes wrong, which is now a higher risk, then you might find out that it's not so pleasant to be there and not be able to get real information. But that happens everywhere. I can't rely on what the Ukrainian government tell me 100% either, obviously. But here in Ukraine, even with martial law, I think I have more freedom of speech than people do in the Emirates right now, in terms of talking about what's going on. Obviously, there are limits to that also in Ukraine, but in the Emirates, you just don't have it. You didn't even have them in peacetime or before this war. So just something to be aware of as well. That also affects the ability to get accurate information because no one can really tell you the truth about what's going on. Another issue in the Emirates, if you have a legal dispute with someone who's an Emirati citizen, you are in a lot of trouble. So I've heard that from lawyers that, yeah, you're done. They're just going to believe whatever the Emirati citizens, they can just basically lie at will. So this then gives them a lot of power. Now, I don't think it's abused all the time that people want to leave the Emirates, but I've heard horror stories where, yeah, that's involved people been thrown in prison because they just say, well, the Emirati citizen said you hit them unprovoked, so now you're going to sit in prison for a few weeks, and then you get deported, banned of re-entry, have to pay compensation, apologize to the guy even though he started a fight with you. So I've heard stories of that. So these are all things to understand, again, culturally, and definitely do your research, not rely completely on it, what influencer has done, including me. You should go and do your own research and come to your own conclusions. So David says, yes, sound is lower for me too. Let me see. It doesn't say it's lower here. That's strange when I look at the volume control. For me too, as compared to other live streams like last week, I think maybe not close enough to the mic. I took off the dead cat, as is known, so I thought it would be clearer. So maybe that's made it. Maybe I just had it a bit lower. John said, he finds it disgusting that the mail order bride in Ukraine and in Kyiv is still alive, going to a war zone for love. Really, don't ask me my thoughts. Well, it's a declining industry. I asked ChatGPT this evening before I came on, was I right in my 2022 prediction that it would die off? They said the in-person is gone. Well, there is one company still running tours apparently, but I guess that's why I referred to them before on the previous live stream. But they don't do it that often compared to prior to the war, and there's no other company that seems to be running it. So I already said, I think you shouldn't come here if your only interest is dating, full stop. I think it's ridiculous to come to a country if that's the only reason. It couldn't be more desperado. And there aren't tens of thousands of Ukrainian women sitting here desperate for you to come either. So I think unless you have you have another reason to be in Ukraine, yes, if you come here and you're doing something else, you're helping the Ukrainian people, and you happen to be single, you'll probably do quite well for yourself. Because even though nightlife is a bit limited compared to before the war, but you can go to Lviv, you can go to Uzhhorod, and it's still going to be pretty good. And even here in Odesa, the parties are going all night. So as long as you're not out on the street between 12 and 5 a.m., if you're out in the street at 5:05, it's completely fine and legal. So there are definitely, you don't have any competition for the foreigners, and that's the main difference. So if you're a foreign guy, you're probably going to do pretty well, but you want to be coming and spending a good amount of time and providing value here in some shape or form. These are the guys who succeed in general, not guys who go on dating tours, romance tours. Again, I think post-war there will be a lot of scammy marketing for that industry here. They'll claim there are no men left and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, like, about the Ukrainian military is 1 million strong, over 90% of men. If the war ends, they're all coming back to the cities. So there's going to be more men coming back. There's not going to be 900,000 single women coming. There's probably going to be hundreds of thousands of single men coming back from the front. So I don't see how it's going to be any better, but no doubt the naive and the desperate will fall for this scammy marketing. As we've mentioned on last week's, we have the representative of the Ukrainian bride business who argued with me the most, who's now down at 180 and is flipping Filipinas, saying, using the same lines that I pointed out to him, I used to point out to him that his whole description of Ukrainian women as traditional is a complete farce. They're not traditional, actually, for these guys that don't have options like many of his clients, because he had them on a live stream. They said they had 0 options in the US. They shouldn't be coming to a place like Ukraine or this region in general. They're not going to have the perceived value for the women. Women are just not going to be interested in general at all. They'd be better off going to a remote Filipino island. And apparently that's what he's now gone and started to pitch. So I was just kind of amusing to see that, yeah, I guess he won't be making videos reacting to me in the future, claiming that the Ukrainians are, super traditional and whatnot, and it seems like he's about to abandon the industry. So for sure, I think it's declining, and I don't watch their content unless a client sends me as a particular interest to review. There's very little going on, and as I pointed out in that video in 2022 where I reacted and predicted the end to it, as a mass industry, of course, there are matchmakers in every country, even in Ireland. I'm sure there's matchmakers that are trying to match local people. It's normally for people over 40, and our fertility windows are coming to the end, normally early for women and for men. So some people are finding it hard to meet people. I saw a video from an Irish guy who's in his 40s, and he's saying he lives in a rural area, apps are terrible, and he doesn't know how to meet people locally. It's just like, I have no options. It's just like, I live in a rural area. So is someone like that going to benefit from matchmaking? Yeah, but that would be matchmaking in Ireland, right? He's going to be able to, probably someone could help him if he can meet people on apps, but coming to Ukraine, a romance where it's going to solve these problems? No, that's very unlikely to be the solution. So my prediction is that, as I said in 2022, the conditions for Ukraine to have that industry in the future are not there anymore. It's going to be more like in Estonia, where they had this industry up until the very early 2000s. There's a mockumentary you should watch. I couldn't find it with English subtitles, so I guess you got to understand some. Some of the dialogues are in English, but it's in Swedish. It's called Screwed in Tallinn. So yeah, you can go watch that and see that they had the same industry in the Baltic states in the 1990s. But something happened. I guess the women weren't traditional anymore. Not that they ever were. So they weren't able to market them. Let me go on to another topic. That wasn't the idea this evening. Hi there, says Sandvin. You need Ukraine insurance. You should provide it to a official website. No. So you're asking me if you need insurance through the official website to enter Ukraine. No, you just need your passport. I have never been asked for anything else on the Ukrainian border. I'm just saying, was I ever asked for, never asked for insurance for sure. Yeah, that's it. The only thing I was ever asked for was my passport. If you're coming as a tourist, you have 90 days visa-free every 180. Except that you just have to show up your passport in 90 days. You're Norwegian. Yeah, you just come with your Norwegian passport. You have 90 days every 180. So that does not mean that you can just leave for one day and come back into Ukraine. If you've been here for 90 days, you need to leave for 90 days and then come back in again. So it's 90 days every 180. John says no, not 190. Yeah, John's already answered the question. Sanford also asks that do you need to show a booking at a hotel or an address? Guess first night, no, you do not need to show anything other than your passport. Yes, assuming you have a citizenship that allows you visa-free to Ukraine, which is, I think it's almost everybody here. Only had one client who needed to get an e-visa, and that was in 2019 because he was a Bolivian citizen. But everyone else, I think, no one else ever needed a visa. John says, you never asked. Someone says, do you know the best border point now? Bus or train? Connor and I differently like them to Romania. He likes them. Yeah, so, yeah, if you're in Poland, I recommend you take the bus and go to Lviv. From Warsaw is the western station in Warsaw. And there are like, I don't know how many buses a day, but there's like buses going every hour at least, if not more than that. And yeah, that's the simplest if you're coming from Poland. I assume you're coming from Warsaw. There isn't a specific border crossing to aim for, just take the bus. You can also take the train. And some people take the train, I brought my friend once to the train station because he was going to Kiev. He took a night train. I don't like night trains at all. And yeah, if you get delayed, also that can be an issue. I like to break up the trip. Yeah, I have one client who's been going straight to Kiev because his fiancée is there, and then he had a bit of stress leaving the last time because I think he was taking the bus. Yeah, he was taking the bus, fixed bus, which is a more comfortable bus to Warsaw Airport, but then it got delayed and there was a little bit of stress. He made his flight, but in general, it's a long trip in one day. I mean, if you have to go, you have to go in one day. He wanted to maximize his time with his fiancée, but in general, yeah, I would recommend that you stop in Lviv. Get a night's sleep, enjoy the beautiful city of Lviv, lovely Lviv, and then head on to Kiev. So that's what I recommend. I'm not a huge fan of the trains at the moment in this region. Yeah, I would prefer to take the bus, mainly because on the train, often you're in places that the internet doesn't work, so it's kind of annoying. The connectivity along the roads is a lot better. Rarely have a problem on the roads. There's another thing I should say about Odesa. As I said, we don't have so many drone attacks. Electricity, in this, yeah, it hasn't gone out where I live for at least 2 months. I think maybe went out once for 2 hours. So we don't have the same electricity problems. I can see the generators are not on. The streets are quiet. And now we have air defense. So let me just see. And I'm not in Dubai, secretly. I'm in Odesa. And so basically what happens during an air alert, I have it turned off because of the issue I had on a previous live stream, but I could hear air defense anyways before a drone will come in. There are different channels you can follow in Telegram, and then you get an overview, normally even with a map about where the drones are, and that lets you know. Yeah, so we got 3 drones coming in close to Odesa. I can see they're a little bit out to sea. I'm just looking out here, that's why I can hear it's in the distance. So it's not where I am at the moment. But I can see they're telling me the district of Odesa, where it is. Actually, there are 8 on the way now. So that's an increase in terms of, and I can see where else in the region. Yeah, I can see where they are. They're just off the coast. So that is what you can see. And you can make if it becomes very loud, if I see a lot of air defense, then I know it'll take me about 3 minutes to get to a shelter from where I am, and I can go. If it's particularly heavy and I think there's a risk, then that's what I do. Obviously now I have the live stream, so that's probably going to make it less likely I run off to a shelter unless it becomes really bad. So that's basically what you do. Once you're used to it, it's not really a big deal. It's kind of used to be an everyday occurrence, but as I said, we haven't had many attacks in the last week. So this will be, if they're really 8 coming in, it's probably the biggest attack since the war started with Iran. Mike says, what up, bro? Hope you're well. Do you think visa-free for Americans traveling to New Europe will survive Trump? Yes, I don't think Europeans are going to block Americans coming. The US did stop certain people who are hostile to Trump, who are US citizens, like hostile in the sense that they said bad things about him. Could it be a tit for tat with some extreme pro-MAGA people not being allowed in? I'm even skeptical about that. I just think they'll try to wait him out. They can't wait him out in terms of building up their own strategic deterrence to Russia. They're going to have to invest in the military regardless and support Ukraine without real US help. Now apparently they don't want to sell as many weapons to Europeans, so we thought to pass on to Ukraine because they went and fired all this ordnance off in the Middle East without a properly well thought out plan, because Trump is surrounded by sycophants. That's the way he set things up. Again, good parallel with Putin. Putin is also completely surrounded by sycophants. So I don't think the EU will go down that road. We'll see what happens in the midterms. If Donald Trump becomes a super lame duck president with the potential for another impeachment process, which probably you wouldn't get convicted because of the how many votes you need in the Congress. But with that all happening, and then presumably a different type of president coming in 2029, then I think they would just not want to start that tit for tat type of behavior. But who knows? Maybe Donald Trump's going to stop, suddenly say EU citizens can't come to the US, and then we're going to have all this consternation. Who knows? He's done so many mad things already. Josh, this cold approach on the side look good or not? I don't recommend doing that. I actually have a video. I'll link it down below if you're watching the replay. You know what? I'll even put it in the chat now because I can go and look it up. The one where I did a video as a social experiment in St. Petersburg, and it was back in 2019, where a coach took me around, and I did 5 approaches using English and 5 approaches using Russian, and yeah, it was interesting. But guess what? I never did it again, even though it was a single guy. I just linked the video where I talk about later on my reflections on it in 2022, because I was just like, this is not, this is not what smart people do. I don't spend all day walking around the shop mall or up and down Nevsky Prospect stopping strangers. Like it's so time inefficient. it's a minor public nuisance, especially with these groups that go around doing it. So yeah, you don't need to. I understand some people want to overcome their approach anxiety. They get really scared approaching people, and this can be a way to do it. But you need, you could approach 2 or 3 people at the shopping mall, I guess, and realize, yeah, the world didn't end because you talked to a stranger. But it's not a good strategy at all in the first place. You should build up a social circle. You should be going to events where it's normal to speak to strangers, and it's easier to demonstrate your value. For example, like you go to something you're interested in that maybe you have a special knowledge of, or you play a part in a community, and you meet people through that. It's a lot more effective than walking out in the street and speaking to random people. And in some countries, a lot of the women who will talk to you will turn out to be the scammers, or there's something a little off about them. Almost certainly they're very open, so it depends on who you're trying to meet. If you're open to meeting someone who is very promiscuous, then this kind of approach is a lot more likely to work with them than with someone who's not, by the fact that they would just be someone coming up to them in the street. Yeah, it's kind of like begging in the dating world if you're going to go around, harassing, pestering, maybe not harassing, but pestering 100 girls on the street per day. Many of the people who promoted this and taught it a decade ago, they've done a mea culpa and said they're basically misrepresenting the effect of it, and it wasn't good for their mental health. There were guys who even committed suicide, by the way, as well, who used to go around doing this. I mean, it doesn't mean everybody is, but yeah, they're just getting rejected all the time, and it affected their mental health. And they kept trying to put a brave face on it, but it's a terrible idea, especially if you're not strong psychologically as well. So Sven then says, in the 1990s it was a good idea. Yeah, exactly. Now, I think just with social media, people can verify. I think there's a bit more awareness about stranger danger as well. More women are going to be suspicious of guys who just come up to them on the street. Depends where, it might be not very culturally accepted as well. And yeah, you can just meet people. I was at a cafe. Let me give you an example in Odesa. Again, I went to my favorite cafe to hang out on a Saturday or a Sunday late afternoon. It's like, were there any men even in the cafe today? I'm trying to think. I don't even think the staff had it. Like, there's one guy who works there, but he wasn't even there today. I don't think there was even a guy in the cafe. I was the only guy. So it was like, yeah, 95% plus female, right? You can talk to strangers there, and it's not going to look that weird if you talk to the people who are beside you or whatnot. So, and go there regularly, know the stuff. People come in, they're always like, oh yeah, they know what I want even, and chit chat. It's just a lot more natural, and it's going to be a lot more effective than walking around the street like a beggar saying, I have no options. Yeah, I did have a client who was into this, and then he went to Moldova, and he was also the only client who ever had identified himself as a passport bro. Yeah, and then he was complaining that, yeah, the girls weren't interested in him in Chisinau when he was walking up and down the street, speaking to them in English. It's like, man, stop doing that stuff. Yeah, of course, if you look like Brad Pitt, then yeah, it might work sometimes, but you're still losing a lot of value, and you can't display, it's odd behavior. So unless you have a lot of value in the eyes of the girl, it's probably going to be effective. Yeah, I just don't encourage it. It's not a very effective way. I mean, not everybody's harassing people by doing it, but at the same time, just the amount of times it works out, even the guys who are good looking, who do it as a business, they say it's like less than 3% that it goes anywhere. And like, if you're not good looking and you're not doing it all the time, it's probably less than 1%. So just invest your time into joining. Go to the gym. You can kill two birds with one stone. I find on month 3, and look at me, I'm not a bodybuilder, right? So I'm not going to stand out in the gym. After month 3, because you go all the time, guys start to talk to me, girls are open, they're all like, hi, blah, blah. So it's super, once you become regular, you can easily meet people that way. And again, that's not something where I excel, where I look like I have the highest status whatsoever. I look like one of the people I have the lowest status, but I am a foreigner here in Ukraine, a Western European, and there are very few Western Europeans. I think there's one guy who's now Czech who's come to my gym because he recognized me from the channel. He came up to me in the gym, and yeah, he's just here on business basically for a couple of weeks. And he said he's, well, maybe a giveaway who is this. If, well, I guess no one's going to raise, but yeah, he said his wife's from Kazakhstan actually, so it's interesting to see and have a chat with him when we were there working out. So, but he's the only other non-Ukrainian that I've met in the gym, in either of the gyms, because I was going to a different gym before. So definitely you have a lot of foreigner factor at the moment. The people who say that they're going to come back after this war ends, but then they're hanging out in Dubai, as I said, and claiming everything is fine. Like, statistical risk is not high here, to emphasize it again. If you come to Ukraine, not very high, it's 1 in a million. Something bad is going to happen per day, right? So if you stay 10 days, it's going to be 1 in 100,000. So it's very low probability. There is a psychological impact. You have to get used to air alerts normally. Well, they haven't been very much in the last 2 weeks. And maybe hearing explosions, like I could hear the air defense there. I mean, for me, it doesn't raise my heartbeat anymore. It's just kind of normal, as long as I know. Normally, I've already heard the air alerts. I know it's coming. And then I can check what the risk level is. And if you are a single guy, you should have a reason to come here. Like, you're interested in the place, you want to promote helping Ukraine, you want to contribute here, you want to spend a lot of time here. Like, the guys who are here, who are foreign and single, yeah, it's definitely better in terms of their dating life now than it's going to be after the war ends. Because if the war ends, you have all the men coming back from the front, first of all. I don't think that many more single women are going to come back, because most of them who want to come back, they've already come back, or they already spend time here quite a bit anyways. And also men will come back from outside Ukraine because they don't want to come back in the moment, because a lot of them they wouldn't be able to leave again. Plus, there may be tens of thousands of foreign soldiers stationed in Ukraine afterwards. They are going to be all over the dating apps whenever they got time. So you can forget dating apps after the war. If there's 30,000 foreign soldiers here, like, you won't even be noticed on a dating app, basically. There's going to be so many foreign guys there. Because this was what I noticed in Lviv after 2014, that they had some military trainers, and I think there was only a few hundred of them based just outside Lviv. And apparently they just flooded Lviv's Tinder completely, right? There were so many of these guys on it, because most of them were single men, young men who were there. So if you have 30,000, just think about it. Plus, you're going to have the hordes of the horny guys. They're going to descend on Ukraine, because 95% of guys think exactly the same way. You're going to think the war is over. Oh, the Ukrainian women are waiting for me. They're going to flood in. They're going to think there's no men here because they passed away during the war. They're going to have all the dodgy marriage agencies telling them that, oh, the women are all waiting for you here. They're all going to flood in the hundreds of thousands. And yeah, you're going to be, if you're relying on being, I don't have my passport in my hand now, but waving your passport saying I'm a Western European or I'm a North American, and you've been waiting for me for 5 years, here I am, you're going to have 100,000 other suitors challenge you for that. So yeah, if that is your motivation, yeah, I don't think you should come during the war, but it's definitely better now than it's going to be afterwards, from that point of view. I think there are other reasons to come to Ukraine, both now and after the war, and that's going to be investment, first mover effect, get the advantage and come now, set up your network. That's the podcast I had with Ben. I'll link it down below again afterwards, but you can go check it's a few videos back, that if you need to come now and do your reconnaissance, because as soon as the war ends, there's going to be so many people flooding back in here that you're not going to have first mover advantage. I'm also considering a business, and I will probably go to Kyiv in a month or so, probably end of April, and try and get some progress made and see if it's going to work or not. Because I don't want to wait until the war's over. I want to have it set up so everything's already in place, because then I'll lose my competitive advantage if I go ahead with this. Let's see. So that's what I'll say about that. Next comment and question. It's brutal in Kremenchuk since October power schedules. Bus seems to be the best way, says Sandin. I reckon Lubin to Lviv as in the past. Yeah. Lubin is halfway between Warsaw and the border. John says for him that commuter-style trains running along the west of Ukraine are brutal. Still prefer the cabin ones. That's just for him. Okay. John says, well, it's also a culture thing in Ukraine, unlike the US, where we are always saying hi. For me, as a volunteer, I made friends in that circle, both Ukrainian and foreign. Yeah, because you're playing a role in Ukrainian society. So it just makes it a lot easier. You have better game as Ukrainian women have you better have game as Ukrainian women have options. Yeah, I think that's clear. Even I'm just thinking of a way to describe Joe Ricards from Match Guarantee. The guy who argued with me vociferously for many years now says that, oh, it's so tough for the guys in Ukraine, the foreign guys who go there. They're better off going to the Philippines. I agree. It's what I said a few years ago. But I find it hilarious to watch him do a complete 180. And, you know, I mean, he's obviously going to say the same things I said 4 years ago. Now he's pitching the idea of going to the Philippines. Roy says, hey, Roy, welcome back. I haven't seen you for a while. Don't need game too easy. I don't think that's the case in Ukraine, that it's that easy. But it's probably easier, I would say almost certainly easier as a foreign guy than it was prior to the invasion. John says, if you start a business, it would be a concrete business and a debris clearance. Makes sense to me, obviously, for the post-war economic boom that Ukraine's going to see. Tak, as I should say in Ukrainian. Other developments, I'll just take a break from the Q&A. I'll just leave it here so I can see it simultaneously. I've already talked about the war. Also, property prices have dropped in Dubai, as you would expect, but no one is really selling and buying. That's what my client who owns property there told me. But his rental prices have dropped quite a bit on Airbnb. And I can't remember how much they dropped. I think more than half. But yeah, no one's coming as a traveler, so many people left. Makes sense. But you know, it can rebound, but it's not going to be like before. I think this is too big an event for the next 5 to 10 years that's going to rebound. I already talked about the sanctions that Trump has now lifted on Russia. I mean, every day since Trump was inaugurated, Vladimir Putin must be in a great mood when he wakes up compared to before. But we'll see after the midterms if Trump is a lame duck. And like the majority of Americans support Ukraine over Russia. Vladimir Putin is not popular amongst the American public. Volodymyr Zelensky is. Majority of Republicans support Ukraine. Self-identifying MAGA, there's a majority that support Russia, but it's not even all of MAGA. It seems to be split. And then, so yeah, it's just a minority opinion that they managed to get into power that's for some bizarre reason doesn't support US national interests and supports Russian national interests, and has a bunch of greedy, incompetent real estate developers leading the two most important diplomatic processes that the US is involved in the Middle East and the Russo-Ukrainian War. And what has happened? No progress. There's a war there. I think this is a complete train wreck. Anyways, let's see what else I commented. I have my notes here. Yeah, I talked about the situation in Odesa. Today the sun wasn't shining as much. I felt a bit more tired today for some reason. And it was a bit quieter in the city because we've had well over a week, about 10 days of every day been super sunny here. Great time here. Yeah, I just wrote that. For sure, summer will be awesome here in Odesa. It could be the last summer before the end of the war, so it could be the last time to come to Ukraine without the hundreds of thousands of romance tourists in general. So definitely a special experience. If you want my private membership, my personal mentorship on a trip, it can also be here to Ukraine. It's not where that many of my clients come. Most of my clients want to go to Riga, Latvia, and to Almaty in Kazakhstan, and to Chisinau, Moldova, and Warsaw in Poland. But I do have some clients that are coming to Ukraine, and don't be Billy nomads, don't try and do it yourself. Don't come just purely for dating, that's my advice. But if you want to have your Irish insider with you to create the social connections, bring you to the right places, you don't need to figure it all out. Don't have to spend months. Don't have to risk, I mean, scamming is not a risk in Ukraine at the moment, actually, there's almost no scamming, so you don't have to worry about that here. But if you want to have my over 10 years of encyclopedic knowledge with you, better than ChatGPT for sure, and it's going to be in person, help you have an unforgettable week and get the first mover effect, get set up. The last client who was with me here is looking at buying real estate in Ukraine as well, so obviously I can also help you with a little bit of advice on the social interactions as well. Go out and socialize at the right spots with the beautiful ladies here in Ukraine as well as we do in the old overseas, but it is different. It's not focused so much on the nightlife here or on the events because it's obviously a bit more limited. It's a special kind of feeling being in Ukraine. It's a historic moment in history, and down below you can apply because it's by application only, and then if I think it's a good fit for us to work together, then we can discuss it further. If you just want my consulting advice, then invest in a call down below there, and we can set up your insider strategy for navigating coming to either Ukraine or another country in the region. As I said, I bring my clients to Moldova, 3 Baltic states, Poland, Kazakhstan, and I did make a video in Romania recently as well. I was actually back in Romania it's 3 weeks ago now. I was in Iași, the city in the east of Romania. Let me just have a look at your comments again. There's a few more coming in. Josh, so what is the maximum age gap that is still decent? 15 years. Like, this is almost the most commonly asked question. How much of an age gap can I have? Well, first of all, you should write your own age, because as the older you get in general, probably the age gap can be older as well, it can be bigger as well. If you're 25, the age gap that you can have is very different than if you're 55. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, it's just one factor. Obviously, age and youth, for when women are selecting men, and for men are selecting women as potential partner, it's obviously a factor, but it's just one factor. So if you are a guy who's obese, broke, smells bad, antisocial, complete introvert, doesn't talk to people, no local social circle, what else can we say? No idea about what he's doing, then you're probably not going to meet very many women in general, and the chance of having a big age gap is even less, right? So, and also the women you're talking to, if it's Miss Ukraine and she's 22, or didn't look up who's the current Miss Ukraine, or it's some unfortunate looking 22, the woman who's 22 and obese, again, we could describe some hyperbole, use hyperbole to describe how low her value is going to be on the dating market. Well, then the chances of having her going for an older guy are obviously going to probably set her priority is going to be higher, right? So basically, at the end of the day, how big an age gap can you have in, say, the country that you're watching this from? Joshua, we said buongiorno. I don't know if you're in Italy. Will it be bigger in Ukraine? Hard to know. Hard to know. Like, age gaps here in Ukraine, they're more common than they are in Western Europe. But it's not like it's every woman is dating a guy 20 years older than them. It's, yeah, more common, but not, most people are close enough in the state. Most people in Ukraine are dating within 5 years age. So it depends a lot on your own value. If you are, yeah, I was going to say Brad Pitt or Leo DiCaprio, you can have a 30-year age gap, no problem. It's not going to be an issue. If, again, you don't have much value, perceived value, then you're just going to have less options. So I don't think like, I'm 47, so a 20-year age gap isn't going to be a big deal, putting it that way. If you go to the matchmakers, always I've got to bring this up because this crazy 23% rule, but it is, now that I understand where they were coming from, why they have it, because they're normally going to have women who are 40 and don't want a big age gap, apparently, from what they say online. But anyways, the 23% rule, there's this like matchmaker said that they don't match the guys with women who are more than 23% younger than them. So since I'm 47, I'd be 36 would be the absolute maximum they would match with. So presumably the woman would probably be over 40. That's what you would get apparently at a matchmaker. If you're fine with that and you're interested in dating women over 40, then it could be an option for you. It's not something I promote that much, obviously, here, and I'm fairly critical of that industry. But you can go watch my playlist down below if you're new to my content and check it out. But if you want to have, it seems like from what Matchmaker Guarantee have done, that if you want a big age gap, then you're going to go to the Philippines, which is what I've said in the past. They're just, Ukrainian women have too many options. They're not desperate. So, yeah, but can you have a 15-year age gap if you're, depending how old you are, say you're 50, so about a 35-year-old woman, and you're perceived as having high value, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a big problem in Ukraine to have that kind of age gap. Let's see. Roy says, my friend talked to a 2004 Ukraine girl for 1 month and he brought her back to the US. So did he meet her in person? So she's 22 years of age, or 21, 22. Or did he just buy her a ticket to fly to the US? Because you say that they talked for 1 month. That seems quite unusual, but yeah, I mean, you could also maybe provide some more information about where they met and what who he is, right? I mean, if he's a famous guy and he's flying some girl out who's yeah, open to that, then those girls used to go to Dubai, so now I guess maybe they're going to fly to the US, but yeah, he must have also had to get her a visa, I guess, as well. Yeah. Sounds kind of odd that he was able to arrange that within 1 month, but okay, maybe she already had a US visa. John said, did he introduce her as his next ex-wife? Not sure what that's referring to, but maybe elaborate that, John. Roy said, everyone says she looks like a mole. Yeah, so I have a video about that, about the difference in the beauty level, because here in Ukraine, and just this region in general, I think also in the Baltics, so Baltics statistic is the place where you have the most catwalk models in the world per capita. So the level of model-like beauty here, it's not for everybody. I know not everybody wants to date a model, right? But you take that example of beauty, then this is part of where we find it the most. As you go further west in Europe, we use that scale 1 out of 10 that most guys should be able to understand more or less. Here, a woman who, most people are around the mean. Basically, most people are average, right? It's like what we call a bell curve, right? So most people, about half of them, are going to be between a 4 and a 6. So we take someone, say, a 6 in Ukraine, so just above average, and you go to Poland, they're probably a 7. If you bring them all the way further west, maybe get to the UK, they're going to be at that point an 8, maybe even more than 8. It could even be a 9. So I have a video about that. I'll link it down below. So yeah, she could go all the way to the US and look like a model. One of my clients got married in North Carolina about 2 weeks ago now, and yeah, there was also some pretty girls as bridesmaids. He did invite me, so and he said I don't have that many male friends for the bridesmaids. I was like, well, yeah, I didn't have much notice, and I wasn't gonna fly in North Carolina. It's so much hustle to get out of Ukraine just for a wedding. I mean, if I want to meet pretty Ukrainian girls, I can go to my local cafe here. I don't need to fly to the US, although it would have been cool to have done it. But yeah, a little bit last minute, and obviously there's opportunity cost and the cost of flying all the way there in terms of time and back again. But yeah, he actually spent a lot of time in Ukraine. It was definitely at least 6 months. He was learning Ukrainian, being here all the time. So not some romance tour veteran or something like that, where he's just, yeah, he was working from here remotely. So something about that, yeah, you want to check with your company if that's possible. I have had clients that ran into issues with their employer when the employer discovered that they were actually in Ukraine. So either do a short period and make sure they don't find out, or yeah, get permission. Stephen is here. Hey, Stephen. Stephen, we know each other for many years. Stephen was the guy who I helped on a consultancy basis. Was it 2019 or was it even 2018, Stephen? It was a long time. You told me about the Polish loophole at the time that US citizens could live in Poland without a visa as long as they left every 3 months, came back in outside of Schengen. And at the time, I had no need for that information. I did not have any clients that I was bringing to Poland. But after 2022 and the invasion, in 2023, I started to have clients. This was very valuable information to have. But now it's already been closed out loophole since, I think, October, so it doesn't apply anymore. So good to see you back in the live stream. But I kind of great info. I'm still flying from Florida to Warsaw directly, non-stop. Good stuff. Still flying from Miami on Polish Airlines, I guess, LOT. Really, he's really loving Moldova as well. Chisinau is great, and I've never seen any foreigners there. There's a few foreigners who live there. but it's not very many. And I think there are less tourists from Western Europe and North America, definitely single men. There are less of them nowadays in Chisinau than there was 10 years ago. I think there's just more options. I think a lot of guys realize that, especially in the last few years, that all the marketing is a bit of a scam, that it's super easy. In Ukraine, the women are desperate or something. They all want to go to America. I think there are other places in the world where that's more true. Apparently the Philippines is now being tested. But even Latin America, Africa, there are a lot of other places. So I just think that, yeah. Roy says, Ukraine is easier than Poland. 100%. 100%. Especially if you're a foreigner, you're more of a rarity. You have so much competition in Warsaw. Because all these, I just find it amazing, all these dating coaches, the only place they go in the region, because it's, you know, now it's becoming expensive, it's not easy to date. The women are beautiful, of course, and the values may be a good match for you, they may not be a good match for you, depending on who you are, in terms of the culture, but they're not desperate to leave or anything. But anyways, these dating coaches, they still only go to Warsaw. They talk up Warsaw, because I think it's a bigger city with a lot of anonymity, so possibly women can be more promiscuous there, and that's more the type they're aiming for as a dating coach, because they need to get laid basically all the time, or at least be able to talk about getting laid, as opposed to saying, hey, I met my wife. It's a little bit different mentality that they're selling, I guess. They're not really selling marriage normally. And yeah, in Warsaw, I don't understand it. My clients, like none of my clients ever moved to Warsaw. There's so much hype about it. I think it's great if you hang out the Belarusian and Ukrainian spots, but I have a connection. Obviously, I haven't spent time in Belarus. I even speak Belarusian, okay? And obviously, I spent half the year in Ukraine. So, yeah, but with Polish girls in particular, I hardly saw any foreign men with pretty Poles. It was so rare. With overweight Polish girls who are not very attractive, sure, I saw foreign guys. But, yeah, with the pretty ones, no. Whilst in Ukraine, there are just so few North Americans, there's so few Western Europeans because of the war. Yeah, I can believe it's going to be easier. I didn't think it was hard in Warsaw in reality, as long as you went to the right place. I even built up a social circle. I just don't go back so often with girls from there, also guys. So yeah, I also had a great time in Warsaw. I can't say it was bad, also from the dating point of view. I think it was hyped up so much, and it's not, also price-wise, it's not expensive, but it's not cheap at all. So that's also, I think, something guys are not aware of, that it's maybe 20 or 30% cheaper than being in North America or Western Europe, and it's closing all the time. So, but it's got great infrastructure, that's for sure. Pollution can be a little bit of an issue. Of course, the weather isn't, I mean, it's not sunny for half the year, so it can be great. Like, the weather is a lot better here in like southern Ukraine and Moldova than it is in the Baltics and in Poland. Poland is also part of the Baltic region. It was the same back in the day in Belarus, bloody terrible grey, lack of sunshine in the winter. So could be still a good place, because Warsaw is like the capital of New Europe, because it's a city over 2 million people. There's a lot going on. You have people coming back and forth. It's, yeah, maybe easier to hang out in a foreigner bubble. I think that's why those dating coaches are there. I think they're just all walking around being a public nuisance, minor public nuisance, and hanging out with each other. But they all hate the three Baltics. They hate Latvia, in the sense that they'd say there's no point to go there, because they said the girls are more suspicious of why you're there than even in Poland. And I don't think, yeah, I guess they're totally immigrants a lot of the time in Poland, so they're a little bit more open, maybe a little bit more naive. They're not in their hometown and wondering why there's some British guy hanging out in, it's just that James said this in one of his live streams I watched, that who I did the social experiment back in St. Petersburg in 2019. I also bumped into him here in Ukraine last summer. He was in Odesa. And yeah, that they're suspicious. Why is this British guy hanging out in a February afternoon in Riga, you know, with no local friends, doesn't speak the language? Yeah, they find it suspicious. So apparently in Warsaw, they don't get as many questions like that. On the other hand, if you go to Riga and you have the connections, it's got great nightlife, but they have no tourist policy at the best places in general. And maybe it's changing now, but because the same owners set up a club that they allow tourists to go to, but it's not the same vibe, obviously, because they have all these foreign guys there chasing the girls. But if you go to the places, only local guys. Only once at the no tourist places did I meet foreigners, and that's because they were US soldiers. So yeah, their attaché had gotten them into the place, but that was the only time. that I met. Well, they weren't tourists anyways. They were like stationed in the region, so I can't even call them tourists. So yeah, it's like a hidden gem. And if I were to pick as a single guy, looking at the values, the beauty of the women, the lack of foreigners at the places, and the culture, then I would pick Riga and Latvia. But it's not an easy place to go to, so yeah, I guess I have a guide for at least you'll know the places. You can write me down below, Connor at connorklein.com. In Riga, you become a dwarf. Yes, that is the thing in Riga. People are taller in the Baltics, so I'm 178. I'll be very frank. I like tall women in general. I saw a good meme on Instagram that I sent around to a few friends and clients. It was like a guy who's 6'4" and he's there with a girl who's like on his wedding day with a woman who's 4'10", and then the next image is his son 30 years later or 20 years later saying, "I hate you, Dad," and all girls pointing at him because he's short, because he's like I don't know, he's supposed to be 5'6" now. So my reply was, why I date women over 172 centimeters, because I'm 178. I want my kids to be a bit taller going forward than I am. So yeah, better to have the genes of the tall girls from Riga than a shorty from somewhere else, in my opinion. But I know, I looked at the research, most men actually like women to be a bit shorter than average. And there's a minority, a significant minority of men who like women to be taller than average, and I fall into that category of taller than average. But I understand an actual majority of men is not their preference, but for me it is. So again, less competition in the Baltics. I think Riga has a lot going on. It's not going to be Warsaw. It's like, you know, a lot smaller, but there's enough nightlife, enough good social events. You can become the local, the local celebrity, the local VIP kind of guy. As my former client Paul said, he said we're like local celebrities here in Riga. He also went Russian, so he's in my video about Connor's Law. Pretty sure I put him in that video. And yeah, the fact that so much of the social life is in Russian in Riga, which is not the case in Tallinn, for example, and definitely not the case in Vilnius, makes it a bit easier for me as well because I speak Russian. So yeah, that's where I would go. Anyways, let me go back to the comments. Royce says, Warsaw things are pricier than they thought. Yeah, slightly cheaper than Los Angeles. Yeah, it's probably 20% cheaper. It's not even 30% anymore. Yeah, it says 20% cheaper. Rebound dwarf. I like somehow 116 below. Yeah, I normally date women at least over 170, at least in the last 20 years. Because I did have a shorter Italian girlfriend when I was at university. But I think all my other, I'm just thinking my Burmese, I guess nowadays I have to say Myanmarese ex-girlfriend, I don't remember what told you. I think she was 170 though as well. And then the other girls were all over 170, normally 174, 175. I did date a girl who was 183 centimeters, so 5 centimeters taller than me, but it was very briefly. Oh, I had a Polish girlfriend for a short time. And I think she was a little bit shorter, yeah. Was she even 170? Yeah, but in general, I like girls who are a bit taller. She gave up dating, I guess you mean in Riga, if you're looking for someone 160 and below. Yeah, the average height in the Baltics for women is 169 centimeters. So 9 centimeters shorter than me. I'm 5'10". So I'm going to do the conversion if you're American and figure out what it is. I don't remember anymore. I know what my height is, but yeah, we use centimeters in Ireland. We use, I think people probably understand the weights and the heights in Ireland in imperial system still, but yeah, I haven't lived in Ireland so long, I don't remember what they are. We used to using centimeters and the metric system. So yeah, if you want 116 below, you're talking about girls who are on average 10 centimeters shorter. So it's like looking for guys who are under 170, basically. In Los Angeles you gave up. Okay, now I understand. I thought you said you gave up in Riga. I was like, man. And I thought it was because you were looking for women 160 and below and you couldn't find them. Because the girls are all taller than 160. But relief to hear that. Yeah, he's just clarified. Did I have any... I'm running out of things to say if it weren't for Match Guarantee going to the Philippines, I think I'd have stopped talking about the matchmakers at this stage. Again, yeah, it's basically where women go if they're in general definitely over 35, but really over 40, because they're coming to the end of the fertility window and they're not really interested in a huge age gap, because most women in general, they could meet someone who's 20 years old and of course be attracted to them, but they're not actually seeking a big age gap. Definitely not over 10 years. So you got to be of reasonably high value, I guess, to have that. If it's going to be an attractive woman who's mentally stable and yeah, got a pleasant personality, and attractive. I mean, she's going to be in high demand. Even if she's over 35 in reality, as I'm still clueless. And again, I love to just emphasize it. All these matchmakers, the 5 I know who do this and still talk about, at least in English, they all met their partners not by doing matchmaking. They all met them through, normally it's by living in Ukraine, or at least having a social circle in Ukraine, and having spent lots of time here, and ironically by having a local business, which was the matchmaking. There's even, yeah, do I have to repeat myself I feel like a broken record about it at this point. And yeah, some of them, they even used the other matchmakers, gave them testimonials, and then they're with someone completely different after they give their testimonial. So it's like, it'll be gone almost certainly pretty soon. And there's a big difference between the ones that are still talking about Eastern European women. They're not, I don't think they're really talking about Ukrainians a lot of the time. Otherwise they would just say Ukrainian. It's a bit odd to keep saying Slavic and Eastern European if you're not going to pitch other nationalities. So again, any other thoughts I had? Let me look at the Q&A. Philippines and Thailand, all retirees from America go there. In Europe, like 20 or 30 years younger. Yeah, there the reason is your foreigner factor, low socioeconomic situation, and quite typically, yeah, women in their 20s, low levels of education. It's also geographically, you need a barrier to entry to have any sort of opportunity, right? So it's geographically far away from, I guess, other places where there are white people, because normally people of European descent that they see as automatically higher status. There's this whole thing of halfies, where people are half European, half Filipino. A lot of them become models. There's an Irish guy. He's part Irish, he's one part is Irish, the other is Filipino. And yeah, he has a channel. His name is Daniel. I haven't talked to, I exchanged some messages with him because he's Irish a few years ago. And yeah, he was all part of the modeling scene when he was a bit younger, and so many of the girls were mixed. So that's the big thing there. And yeah, if you have money, there was a guy, and I need to go back and find his name because I used a clip from his video, from one of his vlogs in my videos to point it out. He was like overweight, in his 40s, and his wife was like more than 20 years younger than him. And he met her on the Filipino islands. So, but I think you also need to probably fund the whole family. If you're going to marry a Filipino, I think you marry the family, and you're going to be the main breadwinner for everybody in that situation. But there you can go and have that crazy age gap for sure. Royce says, I feel like business in Ukraine, having locals as clients is going to be tough. Not much purchasing, but yeah, of course not. I'm not bringing Ukrainians to Ukraine. That even Ukrainians have lived abroad, and that's not the type of person I help. I help people normally from Western Europe, North America, and South America with the in-person service. I've had more diversity in terms of the consulting. I've had people, and I did have one client, yeah, but that's Latin America, Bolivia. I've had people from Southern Africa, consulting clients, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and lots of parts of Latin America, obviously North America, Western Europe. Is there anyone from Africa, North Africa? Israelis, one of my clients. A few guys that bought programs who were like from India or from the Middle East, in Turkey. I don't think I never had an in-person client from any of those countries, and I never even think I had a consulting call. So if you want to be the first, go and invest in it down below. So, any other points that came up? Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with someone who's a viewer who I'd met in person before, he said that I'm a model maxer. My whole life is set up for meeting young models. And yeah, he said it's superficial and it doesn't lead to long-term happiness. I'd rather have the option of having long-term relationships with models than not models, but it's not for everybody, obviously. It's kind of funny. We came to an agreement about after a bit of back and forth, but I like the term model maxing. I think it's great. Yes, I am guilty of model maxing. But as I said on some of the recent live streams, so many of my clients have ended up married and having families with models. And I didn't necessarily introduce them to them, but with my mentoring, that was the level of beauty that they wanted in a wife or in a mother, so not just in a short-term fling. And because when he said model maxing, this means also that I would just go through a bevy of models like they're going out of fashion. Have I been guilty of that? I guess at times in the past, to a certain extent. Lots of some short-term relationships as well. And yeah, guilty is charged. That's my main message. Joshua says, "Will Ukrainian pubs be packed for the World Cup?" It's not as much as in other countries. I was a bit disappointed during the last tournament because Ukraine played, right? And I can't find my Ukrainian flag. I think I lost it that day. The last time I went, because I took it out to go and watch the match, and I don't seem to be able to find it since. So I'm going to have to get a new Ukrainian flag if they play in the World Cup. Hopefully Ireland also make it. We had the rugby yesterday. Probably most people are not interested in hearing about rugby and Ireland playing, but France won the tournament with the last kick in a different game against England. It was so close to Ireland winning the championship in the Six Nations. But yeah, when I watched it the last time, it was disappointing a little bit. It wasn't as, because there were no foreigners, it was during the war, so you don't have all the different nationalities because there's so few foreigners here now. It was very different before, like before the invasion, because then of course you have a lot of foreigners and you have that whole atmosphere of people supporting their teams. But yeah, people will watch it, but it's not as big as it is in the rest of Europe. That's what I'll say. So will the pubs be packed? And not as much as you'd expect. But will people be watching the matches and will they be out in the terraces? Yeah, so you'll be able to watch them and have a few drinks and enjoy it, for sure. One other thing that occurred to me, because I made a video reacting to some, I called them locals at the time, but in hindsight they weren't really locals. They were like from Georgia and Serbia, and one was, yeah, their buddy was Russian. And they made videos basically attacking me because I'm a foreigner, and they said, oh, the girls, yeah, they basically tried to insinuate that I lied to girls, promising them better life in Western Europe, and I just flashed my passport. All the things I say don't work, first of all, and that I actually live in the region anyways. I spend my time here, so I think even if I were hypothetically lying to girls, I'll bring you back to the West. Well, they would want to be really naive if they look at my Instagram, not realize that I'm based here, right? So those kind of girls who want to emigrate, they're just not interested. They were never interested in me or not interested in me for very long, for sure, because obviously I wasn't planning to bring them back to the West. But something occurred to me, because it was quite xenophobic, the video. First of all, they weren't actually from any of the countries where I spend my time. So they were just basically hating on the fact that some foreign men come and are successful with local ladies. And obviously these are guys who don't get women, right? This is for many women. That's why they have a problem with it. So they see it as competition. So they see foreigners as competition. And you will face that a little bit. I think if you speak the local language and you live here, it's not really an issue. I never felt it, but some guys who were with me, not my clients ever, but some of my friends who maybe weren't with me at the time, they complained that they got hassled by guys because they were foreigners and hitting on the girls or whatever. In general, it's not a big issue I find in this region. But another thing that occurred to me, these guys are also a lot younger. So they were like at most mid-20s, because they also brought up the age gap. So I think that occurred to me is also the intergenerational competition, and it is something that I've seen, and I've seen that as maybe a bigger issue on two different fronts, we'll say. One is, well, women in their 30s, and I discussed with one of my clients actually, who's been on lots of trips to meet the Baltics in particular, because he actually framed it as two different demographics. They're going to in this kind of competition, right, be problematic. One is women over the age of 30, because they see the younger women as competition for guys who are maybe late 30s, early 40s, and if you fall in that category, then they don't want the younger women going out with the guys in that age group because they want those guys. So they're going to try and shame the girls or shame the guys for having this big age gap because, well, guess what? It's in their interests if we're looking at it competitively because they want these guys. So they want me, and the women are younger, have a competitive advantage. They got youth, and normally, on average, they're going to be better looking because women normally peak between 20 and 25. Not everybody. It's not the only thing men look at, but it's going to give them an advantage definitely in the beginning. And also, it's going to be younger guys who are local. They may have an issue because they would see you as competition because, yeah, you're going to have more resources, you're going to have more status, you're going to be, on average, we're talking obviously as you get older as a guy, especially between the ages of 35 and 50, and you're going to be a lot more confident normally. It's not everybody, but normally you're more confident as you get older, you have more experiences, and yeah, they may try to use shame as a tactic to eliminate competition. So this is something that occurred to me that I should have brought up in that video as well, that it's also this intergenerational sexual competition as well that you can have where they may say, oh yeah, how old are you? And yeah, I faced that only once or twice, and it's not even just here. I've also faced it in other places where you have some guy who's 20 years of age, and this is not even recently, like say I was 32 and they try to bring it up, and yeah, just have a strong frame. I remember once happened in Germany, and then yeah, I was the one who left with the 20-year-old hottie anyways, so it didn't work very well, but I remember having to rebut someone who was trying to block me that way. So anyways, that was just a thought that occurred to me, maybe of interest to you, maybe not. Just be aware that people may try to eliminate you as competition by bringing up these issues, since I was asked about age gap. But in general, yeah, if it's obviously if you're hanging out in a place where everybody's over 30, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it's for like young insecure men try to use it, and older women will use it. Joshua asks, will the incelification of the West continue? High value men will need to have 3 wives. Is polygamy popular in Ukraine? Yeah. Are these things really big in real life, or is it just something that's talked up on the internet to if they sensationalize things, then they can build an audience and monetize it. I don't think it's that big an issue. Most people pair off. We still have monogamy pretty much in the West. Like, this is part of the West, so I guess you mean the US and maybe the UK or somewhere. I don't know if you can be clear. Is polygamy popular? Well, it's not legal to be polygamous. I have more than one wife in Ukraine, just for clarity. So we're over 2 hours, I see. I didn't really have much else to bring up. I just had this conversation that brought up a lot of stuff about, yeah, I think just since we're bringing up incelification, on this conversation I had about where the guy's I was called a model maxer. Normally that actually means you're trying to be, improve your aesthetic to look like a model, but I like the way he used it. Since I have a penchant for dating models, and also many of my clients, it seems, not everybody obviously, but many of my clients have starting families with models. I have another generation, a beautiful generation with those aesthetics and height normally as well from the modeling. So we're going to have taller offspring. Yeah, the other thing that was interesting in the conversation is this trade-off that you have in terms of what's going to give you more happiness in life. Because if you're trying to excel at something, if you're trying to maximize your wealth, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. Like all these maxing things, like looks maxing, sacrifice. You're going to get taller, you're going to have to break your legs. It's not something I want to do. The sacrifice to do that is too much. If you're going to try to make insane amounts of money, probably going to have no social life, and yeah, you probably have high levels of stress. At least when I worked as a lawyer in a law firm, like it aged me. I remember the first 6 months I worked in a law firm, literally, it was the first 9 months, literally people thought I was 5 years older, 4 or 5 years older than when I'd started. So these are the huge sacrifices. that you have to make. So become the partner in the law firm, make millions, and does it make you happier at the end of the day being successful? And he was like, yeah, you have to do all these things, unless you, yeah, to be model maxing. It's like, man, I haven't integrated my lifestyle, and it's just a preference. And yeah, is there some sacrifices mean that I'm going to be happier? Like if you take it to the extreme that you're looking for just the most beautiful woman that is interested in you, the chances of that relationship being the one that brings you the most happiness, probably not going to be, it's probably a small possibility, but you want to have lots of options, lots of high quality options. And I think that's what structuring your lifestyle is what it's about. Does that, but to be the GOAT, right, to be the greatest of all time, be Tom Brady in American football, yeah, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. And are you going to be, is that going to be over being your happiest? Almost certainly. Like it ruined his marriage to a model, a very famous model, Gisele Bündchen. Like she left him because he just was so fixated, even over the age of 40, in being the greatest of all time. So yeah, if you want to max something out, then you're probably going to have to make sacrifices in other parts of your life that are going to compromise your happiness. But you have to make that decision when you want to be the greatest, or max something, or just focus on happiness, because you can be happy as long as you're not destitute financially, as long as you're not, dating someone you're completely unattracted to. You can make all these compromises and be happy by lowering your expectations. But if you're driven and ambitious, then you want to max out as many things. So max out your fitness. Again, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. If I listen to Andrew Tate, I guess I got to look like him. And yeah, is that going to help me? In fact, even his level of muscles is too much than is optimal, in my opinion. Like you don't want to be fat. You want to be in reasonable shape. I could be a bit more muscular. That would help. I'll probably get there eventually if I keep up this routine for another year or two. That would be, I'd be perceived as higher value by women, for sure. But it's not going to be that much more. And make more money, yes, that would help. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what's going to be the best mix for you. And geomaxing can also help. So yeah, it's not only about dating. That obviously we talk about on this channel, some more intellectual, and we're talking about the geopolitics. Where is the best place really to relocate to? It's more a relocation challenge since 2020, even though obviously a lot of the guys are attracted by the dating. I think that's what distinguishes it from other channels, the fact that I focus on integration, like the whole kind of passport buying thing. That's not, it's about being a non-integrated immigrant or a drifter kind of. They call themselves expats. That's a different mentality than coming here and obviously integrating. And then we have the dating the beautiful people of the region element. It's not matchmaking where, come on, the beautiful women are not going to matchmaker. That's the last place you're going to find the beautiful women, except for once in a blue moon there's going to be an exception, right? So that is the decision you have to make about what is the best mix for you. And that's why I get in a lot of conversations on the consulting side, trying to decide which is going to be the best fit in the region. Obviously, I'm not giving advice on Brazil, even though I have spent a lot of time in Brazil. It's a country I love. I may decide, yeah, by this time next year to go to Colombia and go to Brazil. I may even do an interview with another. I'm supposed to do an interview because he accepted, but then he didn't answer about the time yet. So I'll send him a reminder tomorrow. Yeah, for moving to Colombia and doing a compromise, because I watched all of his videos. So much of an overlap in terms of the issues. But he didn't focus as much on the dating side because he didn't have the in-person service that focused on partying like I had in Belarus and Ukraine in, up until 2020, from 2018, 2019 up to 2020. I guess I didn't have clients for that in 2020 because we had the pandemic already by February. I was in Central Asia and and also Minsk actually in January 2020. So yeah, those are some of the issues that I help my clients with on the consulting in particular. And if they want the implementation part to explore the actual city with my mentorship, then we can do the in-person experience. But again, that's by application only. So yeah, it's going to be a 5% chance that we end up doing it together. As I said, I only speak even on the call with about 10% because I'm quite strict on the vetting. But consulting, of course, we can jump on a call straight away. So you can go book that down below. There's a link. And we'll come up to your bespoke plan. for navigating New Europe and figure out which country, because if you go to the wrong place, of course you can explore them all, but if I can save you spending 3 weeks in Kaunas in Lithuania, because it's not going to be your city and you're going to go to Riga instead, but maybe in the call we decide it's going to be Tallinn, then that's going to save you a lot of money, a lot of time. And then if you're got relationship questions, I can save you investing a lot of emotional anguish in the wrong women, for sure. So most guys who come here, they show up blind, so I'm going to help them see the light to a certain extent. Josh says 80% of women only find 20% of men attractive. Isn't polygamy unavoidable? No, because 80% of women only find 20% of men attractive when it's an unfamiliar situation, like a dating app. That data comes from a dating app, and I even have it in that video that's going to be, I'm almost certain it's linked down below in the description. For at least it's in the playlist. It's the first video in the playlist about dating the model-like women of this region. So that playlist is down below as well. Go check it out. If you're interested in this, you can have like a pretty good catalog of videos there going through all the different points. So when women are in a familiar situation, like it's a work colleague, it's someone they know from going to the gym, it's someone that they know from, I don't know, going to whatever the social environment is that they know the person from, the gut man from, then it's not 20% of men that they find attractive. Women are less choosing on the visuals than men are. Like 80% of men, let's see, we do it the other way around. Like, 20% of men, no, 100% of men find 80% of women attractive, probably, or over the threshold for, maybe that's the way I put it, over the threshold for at least a one-night stand. So, or on some level, they find them attractive. In an unfamiliar environment, because we're more visually based, women need more information to decide whether you're attractive or not. And obviously, if someone is looks like a male model and has the right look, then maybe 80% of women are going to find them attractive on a dating app. That's different to real life. So this is, because this data, you have to understand it in context. Women need time. That's why spending time in the region dramatically increases your chances. Building a social circle where you get to know them obviously pushes up your chances a lot higher. Of course, on a shorter trip, that's why we go to bars and clubs, because it's a social environment where not only is it socially accepted that you talk to strangers, it's expected that men are like women go to a cocktail bar because men are going to come and talk to them. They don't go walk to the shops wanting men to come over and approach them necessarily. Of course, there can be exceptions if you look like Brad Pitt or whatever, if you're famous or something. Of course, no one's going to have a problem with your day-game approach, but in general, that's the environment. There's music, it's high stimulating, people drink alcohol. You don't have to drink alcohol, but there are environments that in a short trip, and you go to the right places, and you're going to have this huge opportunity to talk to, especially if you know to go to the right place. I think in one cocktail bar in particular in Tallinn, for example, which foreigners don't find, tourists don't find. You just have a slew of models there every evening, and your only competition in that moment is going to be the other guys in the bar. So it's not going to be that they only find 20% of men attractive when they're sitting at a cocktail bar single and only one or two guys are going to come over and approach them. At this particular bar, like at the other bars in the messy ones where it's general admission basically and every tourist can find, then it's going to be different. But once you know the right places to go to, so there won't be polygamy. People will still pair off. Well, I think the nature of relations will, of course, evolve. Stephen says, Connor, I was going to visit Belarus before the war. Do you think that it will be enough ongoing place after the war? Some beautiful girls from Belarus and Poland, I think it would be. All right, so I assume you met some beautiful women from Belarus in Poland, and you're wondering what it'd be like after this war. Well, if Lukashenko is still in power and still allied with Putin, or still allied with Moscow, then young Belarusians will continue to emigrate out of the country. It's a train wreck. Even the foreigners who were living there promoting it, and some of the locals, the only channels that were there in English, they've all emigrated out. Nye left, who sometimes comes on here and comments. Anfisa, the channel, she also emigrated to Germany, it seems. She was only there on the holidays making videos. There's a guy, an Australian guy, I can't think of his name, but Australian Belarus. He seems to be in Latin America. And yeah, there's just, see, I'm even forgetting the names because it's so irrelevant, Belarus, for many years. Minsk guide, Andrei, that's his name, because he once helped one of my clients with a visa, but this is back in 2019, I think. And he's still there, so I guess he's decided not to leave. But he's like the only one. He seems to be helping Indians with immigration to Belarus. That's it. At least that's what he seems to talk about. I don't watch it so often because the chance of me going back to Belarus, very slim. So, but hopefully one day I'll go and I'll bring my, what's the name of the flag? They have it begins with P. Is it Patoni? I can't remember the name of the flag. Maybe just let me Google that. Name of historic Belarusian flag. Has a name. Well, white, red, white flag. Thought I had a name. Okay, it's just the historic flag. I'm forgetting it. I'm getting confused with something else then. I think maybe it was the crest in the middle had some name. So, yeah, I'll be going with that flag. So there'll definitely have to be some political changes when I go back to Belarus, if ever, again. But I lived through the golden era of nightlife and being a foreign guy, single in Minsk. 2018, 2019, even towards the end of 2019, they were starting to become a bit jaded, especially with a lot of Turkish and Arabic guys going to Minsk. So maybe it was even fading off at that point in terms of the crazy time we had in 2018, 2019. Yeah, but now it's a shadow of its former self. The nightlife seems so limited there, and so many people leave. It's so, yeah, the best of Belarus left. So that's pretty tragic. I think Belarus has a lot of hidden gem attractions. Yeah, I'm not just, no, because I've talked to guys who've gone there. Yes, of course there's foreigner factor because there's just almost no foreigners, but there isn't that much going on. It's even, like I used to say, Belarus is a bit boring during the week, even Minsk, and now it's like boring most of the time. The economic situation is pretty bad. I had a foreigner call me on the phone who I knew from there who owned some bars, and he was trying to get me to help him sell his bar. And yeah, he told me like business was 80% down. It's really sad what happened to Belarus, but Lukashenko, that's the decision he made. If he hadn't switched back to Moscow's orbit, they probably would have invaded. If he let Tikhanovskaya win the election, as she did with the votes, then Russia probably would have invaded, and they'd just be press ganging Belarusians into attacking Ukrainians at this point. So yeah, it's hard to know in hindsight what would have been the best strategy there with the geopolitical reality. That's why understanding geopolitics is pretty important, which was the theme for this evening. But yeah, I see nearly all the questions have been relationship related, but that's fine. If you want to dive deeper on this, book a call down below. If you're new to this region, to my content, I have a resource page. I have that link down below as well. It's connorklein.com/resources. And there you have my guides for Moldova and Ukraine, my language courses for Russian and Ukrainian. Finally started to circulate the first modules. I'm going to get the feedback that when I sent it out for the first module. I'm going to incorporate that tomorrow, and then I'm going to circulate the second module, and then after that we'll start the first live stream. So I guess if you want to sign up, you can still, if you're interested in learning Ukrainian, and there's details down below on that. Plus there's, on that resource page, I have a lot of playlists from YouTube, so it'll help you navigate getting to know the region, why I recommend it. Relatively speaking, even though we have a war, you're in Ukraine. Everywhere else seems to be going to hell in a handbasket. Is that the term? I've forgotten the phrase in English. Is it hell in handbasket? Why did I say handbasket? Handbasket. Okay, so hell. The rest of the world, definitely Middle East has gone to hell in a handbasket. So, yeah, which is less secure to go to nowadays, to go to the Emirates or to be in Ukraine. Probably not much of a difference. I think it's fine to go to the Emirates, by the way, in terms of the security risk. even with the drones. I think the big issue will be if they run out of munitions, which seems to be the case. That's why they had to call the Ukrainians, and Ukraine is there. It's kind of interesting. Will Ukraine do its, I presume Ukraine will do its best to prevent any technological transfer without it being for a large, hefty sum of money or some support, something as a quid pro quo, because it's so valuable. I hope really doing a deal, the art of the deal themselves, not like the Trump administration with their realtors and the whole place going to hell in a handbasket. Because if you send a bunch of real estate developers to negotiate in the most volatile region on the planet, guess what happens? You end up in a war with no plan, it seems, for how to get out of it. It's pretty ridiculous. But he got away with it in Venezuela. It's just like, yeah, he kind of got lucky because no Americans were killed in that operation. And it seems like everyone's fine, or he's fine with just abducting the president but leaving the regime in charge. Maybe they're a little bit more compliant. But this is Iran, not Venezuela. I think Trump thought at this stage he'd already be on to regime changing in Cuba. But no, that's being postponed for the moment. Also, there was an uprising in, or at least a lot of street protests in Iran 2 months prior, but he had already stationed all the hardware in the Caribbean to take out Maduro. So then, by the time they got everything back over the Middle East, the mullahs had already crushed the opposition and killed who knows how many thousands of people. And now they're in a situation where they can't overthrow the government so easily. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, not a very well thought out strategy. Will I get the new MacBook Neo? Well, I don't know when I get a new laptop. It's not a high priority for now. This one still works. Any other questions? I start off talking about geopolitics and clash of civilizations. The days of the stupid tourist are over. Maybe the days of the stupid expat would have been better. Well, I shouldn't call them stupid. That's unfair. The naive. Maybe I'll put this in my notes here. Change it. Naive expat. Let me know what you think of this comment. If you're watching the replay in particular, drop a comment down below. Send me an email at Connor@connorklein.com. That's all down below. You can copy paste it. People spell my first name wrong in general because there are 2 O's and 1 N in my name. Oh, Ben just got in. Ben, you were the inspiration for the title and the topic today. Also, let me know if you're enjoying this geopolitics light style where I bring in a little bit of geopolitics in terms of talking about Samuel Huntington and Clash of Civilizations. If you enjoy that, if you don't enjoy it, also let me know. Because this is not a hardcore geopolitics channel, but try to bring in some of the elements to it, so you're also getting exposed to new resources that you can learn from and analyze the world and make better decisions, to make more money, better relationships, and live a more fulfilling life. But since I was accused of being a model maxer, I'm sacrificing my personal happiness by being with extremely beautiful women. So I find that's obviously said in jest, but it's kind of amusing. I told him that I love the term and I would use it. Ben says he doesn't know you discuss Europe without geopolitics. There's a war in the country. Exactly, but you'd be surprised. There's big opportunities. Like if you are comfortable with the risk, then this is the region with the most opportunity in Europe. Property in Riga, completely undervalued, because people are scared, a lot of foreign money pulled out, and same in Estonia, but particularly in Riga, in Latvia. And the rental yields are super high. It's a great investment. But of course, if it goes wrong, like Russia invades and blows up your apartment, then it's, but that's factored into the price, because it's like some of the best value real estate in the European Union. And if you invest in over 250,000 euros, you can get residency. Can be interesting if you're a non-EU citizen. Lead to citizenship eventually, but that would take over 10 years. You'd have to learn Latvian. And yeah, you would be eligible for military conscription then. But I don't think that's a huge risk if you're a resident. But that's also something that I hadn't really thought about with these guys pitching. Get a residency there, have 10 passports. Yeah, be eligible for conscription in 10 countries that you don't want to defend. Yeah, presumably. If you want to defend Georgia if they get invaded, then by all means become a Georgian citizen. Same with Turkey. If you're fine if there's a huge regional war with the Kurds, and they decide that actually all men who are citizens now, including the ones that got a citizenship through buying an apartment, you're all now eligible for military conscription. Just factor it in. Are you willing to go and defend the country if it's even a 5% chance, 10% chance? One of my friends is married to a Turkish woman. I think he's going to become a citizen soon. But he doesn't live in Turkey. So I guess it'd be just if he were back on holiday seeing his wife's family, that he'd be taking that risk. So you have to realize that that's now the geopolitical reality. And it could extend to residencies. We see it in Russia. Right, Russia's pretty extreme, but the US did have it in the 70s during the Vietnam War for green card holders. So all these people selling you, diversify your risk, get 10 residencies and 3 passports, some of them may end up being conscripted. So let's see what happens. But some of these countries, I guess, are super corrupt and you probably pay your way out. So as long as you have enough money, you should be fine. But yeah, definitely Serbian nationality if you're a young guy, because they brought back compulsory military service. I think it's 27 is the cutoff for men, but they're just introducing. They may decide to expand that. They're buying lots of weapons. They're preparing the information space for being in a war. Yeah. So would they extend that then to permanent residence? If you get residency in Serbia, it would seem remote, the possibility for now, because I guess they would then conscript men over, older men. So it's the opposite of here. Like here, conscription in the beginning of 2022 was only for men over 27. They dropped that to 25, men over 25 and older. So the youngest men, they're actually not eligible for military conscription. But in Serbia, it's like, I guess, men from 18 to 27 or something. But it's not going to be the older men who are eligible for conscription. So if a war breaks out, like Ukraine did the opposite, so that should be food for thought if you become a citizen in Serbia at the moment, or you become a permanent resident there. I'd be shocked if they extended a permanent residency in Serbia and said, like, Americans have to go fight in the war. It seemed, I think that's very unlikely. But if you become a citizen, same in Georgia, same in Turkey. And it's different if you're a Caribbean island. There I can see, okay, the chances of them conscripting men into the military and you being there at the time, very remote. So St. Kitts and Nevis, whatever, yeah, you're probably 99.99% safe from conscription. Where else are people promoting? Paraguay. There's a chance they'll end up in a war. Again, you need to be worried as a resident. I think it's very unlikely. Where else has been pitched? Vanuatu, I don't know. They end up in I think they had some regional conflicts or violence, but a long time ago. So Solomon Islands did have riots against Chinese traders at one point. So I guess that's nearby, but yeah, I don't think you need to worry about being conscripted Vanuatu army. But yeah, I think if you really believe that the world has gone to hell in a handbasket, then where would you go to that's really going to be safe? Caribbean I just had an operation, special military operation. Middle East, obviously. Africa, if you think Africa is safe, you're off your rocker. It's the place where it's the biggest tinderbox. Latin America also got a good bit of geopolitical risk. Asia, also, Taiwan, as I mentioned kind of cryptically earlier, definitely a possibility that China's going to do something very soon. Especially you guys now distracted and bogged down with this not very well thought of special military operation against Iran. And yeah, where could you go that's going to be safe? I guess somewhere like Australia, New Zealand looks pretty good. But all those people selling you the residencies, they're not selling you Australia, New Zealand residency, are they? They're saying, flee it, it's all falling apart, you got taxes. Yeah, but you're definitely a lot safer in New Zealand. I don't think there's going to be a war down there, unless the penguins in Antarctica decide to have a special military operation, start landing anywhere else. So yeah, maybe some sort of island out there is going to be, maybe Vanuatu isn't such a bad call, but I don't know if there's maybe some possibility of some violence, maybe inter-ethnic violence or something, you never know. I know New Caledonia has that issue at times. So yeah, you want to do your research, and things are definitely changing. I think relatively now, it doesn't, this just relatively speaking, New Europe looking a good bit stronger. US also looking better, because Uncle Sam is actually further away from all the conflicts are. So yeah, I guess you have internal issues with what's going on in the US, but relatively speaking, in terms of global conflict, US is a big beautiful ocean between it and Europe and Asia. So yeah, that's maybe something to bear in mind. Same with Western Europe. Only if there's a nuclear conflict is it really going to be dragged in. Of course, it could be fighting and sending soldiers, but they will be voluntary. It will not be conscription in Western Europe, from what I can see, unless no one wants to go and it's really some sort of emergency. And then would you call it for conscription? I think that's very remote. So yeah, so the geopolitics plays in. So be careful when you get in residency and when you're getting citizenship. I have one client who is eligible for a Ukrainian passport, and he's actually got all the paperwork ready, and he's only going to become a citizen after the war. He's not in Ukraine, and he seems to have started a family in Southeast Asia. So I don't think he's necessarily planning to come. He has it through descent. I think his grandfather is Ukrainian. But yeah, he will become a citizen afterwards, so that he's not, you know, I don't know what would happen. You live in Southeast Asia, you naturalize, you get your citizenship by descent for Ukrainian. What, they sequester you at the embassy? I guess they maybe send you a military summons, and then you ignore it. So you probably get fined if you don't want to go and do your military service. But yeah, the shrewd thing to do would obviously be to wait. I mean, if you want to go and find the military, you can volunteer. That's actually the best thing to do. Not be conscripted. Actually volunteer if you want to serve in the military, obviously. Yes, St. Patrick's Day is Tuesday. I will go out and have a few drinks. The guy who came up to the gym, the Czech guy, sent me it is the Irish pub that I would actually go to in Odesa. There's a few. So I may go and have a drink on Paddy's Day. But I'll need to get the gym out of the way first. Any further questions or comments? I guess we're up to 2.5 hours. Again, let me know your thoughts, whether you enjoyed this format. I may, as I showed you the last time, because I have my Sony here, I can buy some sort of connector, because I bought one in the past and returned it because I bought it when I was in Almaty in Kazakhstan, and I could only actually stream in 1080p, so not actually in 4K, you know the camera's 4K, and the internet was too slow in Almaty at the time. I think now it's fast enough, but it was not great back in 2023 to do the live stream on a 4K camera. That only comes out in 1080p on YouTube anyways, apparently. So I'm gonna have to look, maybe if I can stream in 4K and it actually comes out in 4K, I'm gonna do this regularly, and you like this time and the format where I discuss other things, like make it a lot more intellectual and discuss geopolitics as well in a lighter format, more user-friendly for someone who's looking at it for relocation purposes and maybe for investment purposes, then yeah, I can consider doing that. But then I would, yeah, set up the cameras, have it connected to the laptop, and I could actually stream in higher quality and make it a more formal setup as opposed to using my camera and the camera phone. Any final question? I don't think there's anything that I neglected. Again, resources page, there you're gonna have the guides. If you are interested in a guide to Kazakhstan or to somewhere in the Baltic states, then write me an email, I can offer that to you. I don't have it set up for sale, but since they're drafts still, both of those, hopefully they're finished in 2026. And then I put them on the resource page, but just write me an email, connor@connorklein.com, and invest in that. And otherwise, yeah, the language programs are there on the resource page. Again, we're going to get started very soon with the Ukrainian finally, and within the next 2 or 3 weeks with the actual live streams. And if you want your bespoke plan and not come here as building nomads, clueless, well, you may be building nomads with seconds if you just do a consulting call, but if you want the in-person experience, the immersion, my New Europe experience, you want to apply for that, there's a link down below in the description. You get the hands-on support. It can also help you with your communication skills, so what these guys call game. And we'll go out to the best place. You don't need to worry about all the research. It's already done for you. You're not really nomads. You don't have to worry about getting scammed or having linguistic issues, because I speak the local languages normally where we go, at least be able to communicate effectively. And we will go to the best spots. You'll have an unforgettable week. We'll party hard. If you're coming here to Ukraine, a little less partying. We will go out and socialize, because that is possible here. And I'll be able to give you advice. I have been in this region for over 10 years. There's no one else offering this kind of service. The service I wish that I had available when I was working as a lawyer in Western Europe, because I had limited time, like I couldn't just move and spend 6 months to figure it out in a row in one city. And then I'd need to travel around and figure out where the best cities are. And yeah, that's rewarding to see a little bit of everything, but it's not very effective. Like there's some places that I never went back to because I didn't like them. And it would have been good to have had someone advise me, hey, you want to go here and here. And I did have some people advise me who have been to, say, Ukraine before, and I tapped into that. But actually, we have someone come with you, with the social circle, be able to go with their crew. It's transformative. And I described a few times in these live streams that with a bit of luck, like a serendipity, basically, I got this contact in Odesa over 10 years ago. We're still friends. And yeah, that transformed everything. It was like a game changer then. I was able to troubleshoot all the issues. I had a social circle. I got all the insider knowledge. And yeah, I wasn't really nomads traveling around, because obviously you do have like interesting experiences as well, but it can be lonely, and it's, you know, especially for if you're a single guy, it's so ineffective doing the solo missions as a weekend warrior. Yeah, I mean, it builds up a bit of fortitude, like you have to be able to approach women. This guy was asking me about doing the, you know, cold approach. Yeah, either you're going to be a mute and talk to no one, or you have to overcome that. And I remember actually the first day I was in Lviv, I think it was, I was sitting on a terrace and this girl was looking over me, and I just didn't have the confidence to go over and speak because I didn't speak Ukrainian. At all the time, we spoke a little bit of Russian. This is like well over 10 years ago. It's like 2009. So, man, it's like coming up on 17 years ago this summer. And it haunted me that I didn't go over it, because she walked by me, she'd been drinking with her friends. There was also a guy at the table, made me feel a little bit less secure about going over and having to speak in English, whatever. And after that, I promised myself, I'm not going to pass up any other opportunity. I'm just going to over talk to people. So, yeah. Once you overcome that, of course, I actually met a guy who was Belgian on that trip, because he was sitting at a table with two girls, and one girl was interpreting for him with her friend, because he met her. So I hung out with him. So then I wasn't with any nomads, but he was just there for like a day or two, because he had a friend who was Ukrainian in Belgium. And later on, I kept in contact with the guy for like a year, but I don't think we met up again. Maybe we did once. But then I actually ended up meeting one of his best friends like 10 years later. It was kind of funny coincidence. Yeah, he married someone from the region as well. So yeah, I wish I had that service available when I had been the lawyer in Brussels or in Munich, spending all these trips coming over. Yes, it would have been so much better in terms of being more efficient, going to the best places. Definitely as a single guy, in terms of meeting women, would have been way better, but had the social circle effect, just as a lot more fun, being with the right person as you know, company going out. It's better probably to go alone than someone who's lame, but obviously going with someone who's the insider and spent over 10 years and has social connections and knows how to interact and knows all the best places. Anyways, you get the picture. If you want that kind of in-person, hands-on mentorship, then down below you can apply for it. If you prefer, because maybe you're earlier on in the journey, you're not actually getting on a plane next week or in 2 weeks' time, where you want to do some more research and you want my advice on a consulting call, you don't need to apply for that. You just need to go and book it. The link is down below. And if you're earlier on your journey, is even earlier on in your journey, just doing some research, then go to the resources page and you can maybe invest in, yeah, the guidebook or the language programs there. As I said, I did have dating programs in the past and socializing programs. I don't promote them at the moment. I think there's been a good few changes also. and I haven't updated them since I think 2023. But I do have a promotion on for my mailing list at the moment where you can get in on it. And yeah, I just ended one of them today, so it'll be another one for the Scambuster Secrets, I think on Tuesday. But you can write me, Connor@connorklein.com. I guess if you missed it, I can offer it to you. If you write me an email, so it's down below. And otherwise, I think that's everything. Let me see on the Q&A, in the comments section. Is the dating scene better if you dress in a suit or casual? Depends on the milieu that you're going to. So, are you going to an upscale cocktail bar? Are you going to an electronic music party? Because if it's an electronic music party you're going to, like I go to so many of them in Chisinau in the summer, which is like really cool vibe, then you don't want to be in a suit. You want to be wearing something casual. That's something I can advise you on in really granular detail if we're obviously in person or on a consulting call if you really want to dive deep in that. But it's just simple. I don't know where you'd really wear a suit. I guess you could wear it at a cocktail bar. It's fine at a cocktail bar. But you don't want to look like you just came from work in general. It's kind of, well, you don't have time to change. I think dress shirt, yes. Steve says, great format. Take care, my friend. Okay. Chat soon, Stephen. Let me know how you get on in Moldova and in Poland. Any last comments or questions? Because otherwise I'm going to close this out. So we discussed Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington a little bit today. Very light geopolitics. And also I ran you through the updates on my thoughts on the Russo-Ukrainian War. Maybe I say that, yeah. Obviously the last 2 weeks have been a big boon for Vladimir Putin in terms of resources and revenues because the price of oil went up. And when this operation began, I thought on average, there's a lot of moving parts obviously, but I think it's probably going to favor Ukraine. But that was on the presumption that Donald Trump actually, I don't know why he would make that presumption, but he had a plan for regime change, that he wasn't just planning on killing the Ayatollah and letting his son take over, who may be just like, he may even be more dangerous and possibly more competent than his father. I don't see what this achieves in terms of the leadership change, because he's obviously not going to have a good relationship with the new leader of Iran. So I guess it depends on how it all ends, or at least how things play out after the short run. Who will have benefited most from this war? At the moment, it looks like Vladimir Putin, probably because he got a bonanza from the oil price for already 2 weeks, and we don't know what's going to happen there. And maybe the US already lifted some sanctions. They may just continue to lift sanctions, maybe an excuse for them to do so, or some sort, they have a ruse to try and help Russia, this administration, which is not what the American people want. It's not what the Congress wants. It's not what the majority of the Republican Party want. It's a rogue regime at this point in Washington in terms of foreign policy. That seems to be pro-Kremlin, a lot of it. And the other things that are factors are Ukraine is now really important in drone defense. This will allow Ukraine to get something as a quid pro quo, either intelligence, weapons, money, something from those Middle East countries that now need Ukraine to basically help their defense. So, and I suspect that Moscow is sending many of their drones to Iran. Otherwise, they would have been firing them at us here in Ukraine. On the front line, Ukraine is making the most progress that they've made on the battlefield since 2023, which is interesting. Starlink was turned off for the Russians. Why it was ever working with the Russians is a great mystery, with Elon Musk as obviously being in charge of Starlink, and he turned it off for the Ukrainians at a certain point earlier in the war when they were about to launch a major operation on Crimea. So it seems that on the battlefield, Russia doesn't have the capacity to launch an offensive. They're losing a little bit. It's only a small bit of territory. It's mainly the Zaporizhia and Oblast, a tiny part of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast that the Russians have controlled. So on the battlefield, things are going against Russia. So presumably they have to divert some resources to Iran, probably actually sent drones. That's what I suspect, because it coincides with a drop-off here. But with the amount of money that they made in the last 2 months, it's a good bit. So they can continue the war on for an extra few months, probably already on the bonanza they got, because the Russian economy is in a lot of trouble. So yeah, he's bought some time. So in the short run, it seems to have probably favored Russia so far. And they have an incentive to keep this war going, attack the other countries via their proxy in Iran, attack the Arab states, the other Arab states, and US in Western interests. Even Cyprus was hit. So all this has to be played out. So we'll see. But understand geopolitics, especially when it comes to relocation, not just being a tourist, going to be more important. And actually, by having this live stream and having discussed it with you, I realized that actually the residencies, these people selling the residencies, this is also an issue. I was just thinking in terms of citizenship. Okay, you buy the Caribbean, which is not really that useful, except for some visa free from what I can see, but you're not going to get conscripted. Yeah. How many people are actually going to become a Georgian citizen, a Turkish, yeah, maybe Turkish citizens, there's a lot doing that. They should be wary of it. But now, even if you get residency in some of these countries, yeah, if you see what's happening in Russia, you may get conscripted. So, new reality, be careful about having the right plan about where you're going to go to. If you were to be resident in this region, I am not concerned about conscription. In Ukraine, they don't even conscript men under 25, so that's the policy. But again, compulsory military service in Serbia for men up to 27 being introduced, and that could get expanded very quickly. So I think in Poland, I can't see it. If there's an invasion, it'll have to be like a 2022 style invasion of Poland, and Russia's not going to have the capacity for even in the medium term. But they would have the capacity for a limited military operation against Latvia, less likely against Finland because Finnish army is bigger, against Estonia, maybe against Lithuania. So there, if you were a resident in one of those countries, I don't think they will conscript you if you're a resident. I think it would be a limited operation that would probably happen, probably to try and prove that US won't come to its allies' support, right, with some plausible deniability. So if you were a citizen of Latvia, yeah, maybe there's a possibility you wouldn't be able to leave and you'd be conscripted, but I think it's actually a pretty remote possibility. I don't think the nature of the invasion would be big enough, anything that could be foreseeable in the near future. So yeah, I think in this region, ironically, it'd actually be fine for conscription. I wouldn't go to live in Belarus either, because yeah, they might get annexed by Russia, and then they're definitely conscripting the men, because they'll be easy to do. There'll be less problems in Moscow if they send a few 100,000 Belarusian men to get killed somewhere. So anyways, on that note, unless I have a final question or final comment, I'm going to wrap it up. We're coming up on the 3-hour mark. And again, go check out the links down below. Also, my email address is there, some videos, the resources page, the links for the consulting. We can jump on a call, figure out your strategic plan for coming to the region, so you save time, money, and emotions. And of course, if you want your Irish boy here, coming up on St. Patrick's Day, could be you on St. Patrick's Day with me in Odesa. If you apply tonight and are willing to fly to Chisinau tomorrow to be in Odesa for St. Patrick's Day, and it'll be a blast. It'll definitely be an unforgettable night on the town, or late evening on the town, because we have curfew. And but if we were in Lviv, we could definitely party all night. I'm sure there's going to be some all-nighter party in Lviv for St. Patrick's Day. So enjoy Paddy's Day. On that note, Sloan Gofoil and Dopa Bachna from Odesa Mama in free Ukraine in these times of great geopolitical turbulence. Doesn't look relatively as bad to be here or in this region now after what's happened in the last few months or so. And have a great rest of the day, morning or evening, wherever you're watching this from, and catch you soon on another live stream and in some of my other videos. We have started the editing on the Chisinau summer vlog finally, and also on, my trips to Almaty and to Riga. So some more content coming up on this channel. I will be doing some more interviews for the vodcast. As I said, I've already discussed with one influencer who I like his channel from Medellin in Colombia. And I'm gonna finish up a new video for Ukraine probably in the next month. We already have part of the editing done, and then I'll definitely be recording a lot more now that the weather is getting better and we'll be traveling to the parts region. So ciao ciao and chat soon. Slava Ukraini, Heroям Slava.